Imagine a world where fiction and reality blur, where the greatest detective, Hercule Poirot, steps off the page to solve his creator's darkest secret. In 1926, Agatha Christie vanished for 11 days, leaving England in a frenzy. Was it a breakdown, a publicity stunt, or something more sinister? A cryptic letter summons Poirot to uncover a hidden manuscript, a coded journal, and a secret society guarding a literary conspiracy. Why did Agatha disappear? Who wanted her silenced? And what truths lie buried in her stories? Join Poirot on a thrilling chase through England's shadows to unravel the mystery of his creator's heart. Chapter 1. The vanishing author. The fog clung to London like a conspirator's cloak, muffling the clatter of hooves and the distant rumble of motor cars as Hercule Poirot stepped from the Dover train onto the platform of Victoria Station. It was a damp, chilly evening in November 1926, and the air carried the sharp tang of coal smoke and anticipation. Poirot adjusted his immaculate Homburg hat, his gloved fingers brushing the brim with a precision that matched the meticulous order of his mind. His small, polished shoes clicked against the cobblestones as he maneuvered through the bustling crowd, his sharp green eyes scanning for the porter he had wired ahead to meet him. A cryptic letter, received just 3 days prior in his Brussels apartment, had summoned him across the channel with an urgency that piqued his curiosity and stirred his restless intellect. The letter, written in a looping, feminine hand, was signed only with the initials AC. It spoke of a mystery, not of murder or theft, but of a disappearance that had gripped England's imagination. The words were few, but deliberate. Monsieur Poirot, your mind alone can unravel what was hidden in plain sight. Come to the Savoy Hotel, room 312, at your earliest convenience. AC. Enclosed was a newspaper clipping from the Daily Mirror, dated December 1926, detailing the vanishing of Agatha Christie, the celebrated mystery novelist who had left her Berkshire home and vanished into the ether for 11 days. The article hinted at scandal and unfaithful husband, a car found abandoned near a quarry, and a public both fascinated and horrified by the enigma. Poirot, who prided himself on solving puzzles others deemed insoluble, felt an inexplicable pull toward the case, as if the little gray cells of his brain had been personally challenged by the missing author herself. The porter, a wiry lad with a cap too large for his head, materialized from the fog, hefting Poirot's leather valise with a grunt. "Savoy Hotel, sir?" he asked, his Cockney accent thick as the mist. "Oui, precisement," Poirot replied, his voice clipped yet warm, betraying none of the impatience he felt. "And do make haste, young man. The hour grows late, and Hercule Poirot does not keep mysteries waiting." The cab ride through London was a study in contrasts, gas lamps flickering against the encroaching electric glow, horse-drawn carriages jostling with sleek automobiles, and the city's pulse beating beneath its fog-shrouded skin. Poirot's mind, however, was elsewhere, dissecting the letter's implications. Why had AC chosen him, a detective known through the pages of fiction, to probe a real-life enigma? And why now, nearly a year after Agatha's reappearance, in Harrogate, when the public had largely moved on to fresher scandals? The questions danced in his mind, each one a thread in a tapestry he was determined to unravel. The Savoy Hotel loomed into view, its grand facade a beacon of elegance amid the city's grit. Poirot stepped into the lobby, where crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over marble floors and velvet-upholstered chairs. The concierge, a man with a waxed mustache rivaling Poirot's own, greeted him with a deferential nod. "Monsieur Poirot, room 312 awaits. Your guest has been most particular about your arrival." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Dawned. And the name of this guest, if you please?" The concierge hesitated, his eyes flickering with unease. She gave only initials. Sir, AC said you'd understand. Poirot's smile widened, though his eyes remained sharp. Indeed, I do. Lead on. The lift to the third floor was a gilded cage, its operator a silent figure who avoided Poirot's gaze. Room 312 was at the end of a plushly carpeted corridor. Its door, unremarkable, save for a faint scratch near the handle, as if someone had fumbled with a key in haste. Poirot knocked twice, his knuckles precise against the polished wood. The door opened to reveal a woman in her late 60s, her silver hair pinned neatly beneath the cloche hat, her eyes bright with a mixture of apprehension and resolve. She wore a tweed suit, practical yet elegant. Her hands clutched a worn leather satchel as if it were a lifeline. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. I am Clara Henshaw, formerly of the London Gazette. I wrote to you as a C to ensure discretion. Please, come in. Poirot stepped inside, his gaze sweeping the room, a modest suite with a writing desk, chaise longue, and a window overlooking the Thames, its waters glinting faintly through the fog. He removed his hat, placing it carefully on a side table, and turned to Clara. Madame Henshaw, your letter was most intriguing, but it lacks clarity. Why summon Hercule Poirot to investigate a disappearance that has, as the English say, already been put to bed? Clara gestured to a chair, her movements brisk. Because, monsieur, the truth of Agatha Christie's disappearance was never fully told. The public believes it was a nervous breakdown, or perhaps a publicity stunt. But I knew Agatha worked with her on interviews, followed her career. She left something behind, something she meant for someone like you to find. Tarot's mustache twitched, a sign of his piqued interest. And what, pray, is this something? Clara opened her satchel and withdrew a tattered journal, its cover faded green with gilt lettering barely legible. AC 1926. She placed it on the desk with reverence, as if it were a relic. This journal came into my possession shortly after Agatha returned. She sent it to me with a note, asking me to keep it safe until the right person came along. I believe that person is you. Poirot's fingers brushed the journal's cover, noting its worn edges and the faint scent of lavender clinging to its pages. He opened it to the first page, where a single word was scrawled in bold ink: betrayal. The script was unmistakably Agatha's, matching the letter he'd received. His heart quickened, not with fear, but with the thrill of a puzzle taking shape. Madame, you speak of betrayal, he said, his voice low and measured. Whose betrayal, and why entrust this to me, a stranger? Clara sat across from him, her hands clasped tightly. Agatha was my friend, Monsieur Poirot, though our paths diverged. After her fame grew, in 1926, she was unraveling her husband's infidelity, her mother's death, the pressure of her novels. The world thought her disappearance was a collapse, but I believe it was deliberate, a way to reclaim her narrative. This journal holds her truth, but it's written in a way only a mind like yours can decipher. She admired you. You know, her own creation, the detective who sees what others miss. Poirot's eyes narrowed, though a flicker of pride passed through them. You suggest Madame Christie saw me as more than fiction? Clara's lips quirked into a wry smile. She saw you as her mirror, monsieur, a mind that could outwit even her own plots. She told me once, over tea, that if anyone could solve her greatest mystery, it would be Hercule Poirot. But there's danger here. There are those who don't want this journal's contents, known people with power, perhaps even in literary circles. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, a gesture that signaled his little gray cells were at work. And you, Madame Henshaw, why not take this to the police or the press? Clara's face hardened. The police dismissed Agatha's case as a domestic squabble. The press turned it into a circus. And I owed her this. I failed to help her when she needed me most. This is my amends. The room fell silent, save for the distant hum of London beyond the window. Poirot opened the journal again, scanning the pages. The entries were dense, written in a mix of prose and what appeared to be a personal shorthand symbols, abbreviations, and phrases that hinted at a code. His mind, trained to detect patterns, seized on a recurring motif, a key, a mirror, and a rose woven into descriptions of Agatha's emotional turmoil. One passage caught his eye. The key to my heart lies where the roses bloom, but the mirror shows only half the truth. Madame Poirot said, closing the journal with a snap. This is no ordinary diary. It is a puzzle, a challenge, but I must know more. Where did you find this journal, and why do you fear these powerful people? Clara rose and paced to the window, her shadow long against the curtains. After Agatha reappeared in Harrogate, she sent me a parcel with no return address. Inside was the journal and a note saying, "Keep this safe, Clara, until the right mind finds it." I hid it in my attic, thinking it was just her way of coping. But last month, my home was burgled. Nothing was taken except a box of old letters from Agatha. I realized someone was looking for this journal. Then I saw men watching my housemen in gray coats, always at a distance. I'm no detective, monsieur, but I know fear when I feel it. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Men in gray coats. It's most interesting. And you believe they seek this journal because it reveals what, precisely? Clara turned, her eyes fierce. Agatha was no fool. She knew her disappearance would draw attention, and she also knew it would expose secrets about her husband, her circle, perhaps even a society she was part of. Writers, publishers, people with influence. The journal might name names, or worse, reveal truths they've buried. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The idea of a secret society intrigued him, though he remained skeptical. Yet the journal's code, the symbols, and Clara's fear were tangible enough to demand his attention. Very well, madame. I shall take this journal and study it. But I must ask where. Is it safest to keep such a thing? Clara hesitated, then reached into her satchel and produced a small brass key. My attic, in Islington. There's a locked chest under the floorboards, hidden beneath the rug. It's where I've kept it all these years. Take it there and guard it with your life. Poirot accepted the key, its weight reassuring in his palm. Bon, I shall go to Islington at once. Caillou must be cautious. If these men in gray are watching, you are not safe here. Clara's smile was grim. I've lived long enough to know how to disappear, monsieur, but you'll be wary. Agatha's mystery is deeper than it seems. Poirot donned his hat, tucking the journal inside his overcoat. Fear not, Madame Henshaw. Hercule Poirot does not fail when the truth is at stake. The journey to Islington was a tense affair. The fog had thickened, and the cab's headlamps barely pierced the gloom. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the fragments of Clara's story. Agatha Christie, a woman who crafted mysteries for a living, had orchestrated her own vanishing act. But why? To escape her husband's betrayal, to test her own genius, or to expose something greater, something hidden in the shadows of her world. At Clara's modest terraced house, Poirot found the attic as she described, dusty, low-ceilinged space, cluttered with trunks and old newspapers. The rug was heavy, its edges frayed, but beneath it he found the loose floorboard and the chest. The key turned smoothly, and he placed a journal inside, locking it with a satisfying click. As he straightened, a creak sounded from the stairs below. His hand tightened on his cane, which concealed the slender, bleeded precaution he rarely needed but always carried. "Who is there?" he called, his voice calm but commanding. Silence answered, followed by the faint scuff of boots retreating. Poirot descended swiftly, but the street was empty, the fog swallowing any trace of an intruder. He stood for a moment, his breath visible in the cold air, his mind alight with possibilities. The journal was safe, but the mystery had only begun. Agatha Christie had left him a trail, and he would follow it to Torquay, to Harrogate, to the ends of the earth. As he hailed a cab back to the Savoy, the single word from the journal echoed in his mind: betrayal. It was a word that promised secrets, danger, and a puzzle worthy of Hercule Poirot's genius. The chapter closed with him gazing out the cab's window, the fog parting briefly to reveal the city's lights, a constellation of clues waiting to be deciphered. Chapter 2. The journals ciphered the rain-slicked streets of London, gleamed under the gaslights as Hercule Poirot stepped out of the Savoy Hotel. The tattered journal clutched beneath his overcoat. The city buzzed with its usual cacophony: horse-drawn carriages clattering over cobblestones, vendors hawking evening papers, and the distant whistle of a train slicing through the fog. Yet Poirot's mind was elsewhere, ensnared by the single word scrawled on the journal's first page: betrayal. It was a word that carried weight, a word that whispered of secrets and wounds, and it set his meticulous brain alight with questions. Who had betrayed Agatha Christie? And why had she chosen him, her own creation, to unravel this mystery? Clara, the retired journalist who had handed him the journal, had been adamant that it held the key to Agatha's 11-day disappearance in 1926. Her attic, cramped warren of dusty crates and yellowed newspapers, had smelled of mildew and memory, and her eyes had glinted with a mix of reverence and fear as she pressed the journal into his hands. She wanted someone to find it, Clara had said, her voice trembling. Someone like you, Poirot. Ever the skeptic of coincidence, had nodded politely but reserved judgment. Now, as he navigated the labyrinthine streets toward his temporary lodgings in Bloomsbury, he felt the journal's weight as more than mere paper was a puzzle, a challenge, a plea from its author. His rooms at the boarding house were modest but tidy, with a single window overlooking a narrow alley. The landlady, Mrs. Whitmore, a stout woman with a penchant for gossip, had left a tray of tea and biscuits on the table. Poirot ignored it, his attention fixed on the journal. He settled into a creaking armchair, adjusted his pince-nez, and opened the cover. The pages were brittle, the ink faded in places, but the handwriting was unmistakably Agatha's, precise, yet hurried, as if penned under duress. The first entry began abruptly: December 3rd, 1926. The world believes it knows me, but it does not. Archie's heart has turned, and with it, my own. I am no longer the woman who writes tidy endings. I must vanish, not to flee, but to prove I am more than their stories. The key lies in what I leave behind, in the words I weave. Let them search. Poirot's mustache twitched. The entry was cryptic, but it hinted at intenta deliberate act, rather than a whim. Agatha had not simply vanished. She had orchestrated something, a performance perhaps, to reclaim her agency. But the mention of a key intrigued him most. Was it literal, a physical object, or metaphorical, a clue hidden in her work? He turned the page, only to find the next entry written in a peculiar shorthand, a mix of abbreviations and symbols that defied immediate understanding. It was a cipher, subtle but deliberate, designed to conceal its meaning from casual eyes. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Ciphers were not new to him. He had cracked codes in wartime correspondence and unraveled riddles in murder cases. But this was different, personal, intimate, as if Agatha were testing him directly. He fetched a notebook and pencil, determined to decipher the text. The shorthand used a pattern of dots, dashes, and abbreviated letters, interspersed with what appeared to be deliberate misspellings. He copied the first line, K. Y M R R R's T dot Q dot Y D V N T H E. Symbols were tantalizingly familiar, yet elusive. Poirot's first instinct was to treat it as a substitution cipher. But the irregularity suggested something more complex, a Polybius square, perhaps, or a code tied to Agatha's own stories. He spent an hour testing hypotheses, filling pages with grids and letter combinations, but the text resisted him. Frustration crept in, a rare sensation for a man who prided himself on clarity of thought. He arose, pacing the small room, his polished shoes clicking against the floorboards. A knock at the door startled him. Mrs. Whitmore peered in, her face a mask of curiosity. "A gentleman to see you, Mr. Poirot," she said, her tone suggesting she had already formed an opinion of the visitor. "Says it's urgent." Poirot straightened his tie. "Show him in, if you please." The man who entered was tall and gaunt, with a face like weathered parchment. His tweed suit was impeccably tailored, but his eyes darted nervously, as if expecting pursuit. He introduced himself as Dr. Edmund Fowler, a retired cryptographer who had worked for the War Office. Clara had sent him, he explained, having mentioned Poirot's task to a mutual acquaintance. "I understand you have Mrs. Christie's journal," Fowler said, his voice low. "Clara thought my expertise might be of use." Kachi said, "It's unlike anything she's seen." Poirot regarded him warily. Trust was not a commodity he dispensed lightly. But Fowler's credentials were verifiable, and the cipher demanded a second mind. "Very well," Poirot said, gesturing to the journal. "But I must warn you, monsieur, this is no ordinary puzzle. It is personal to Madame Christie, and I will guard her secrets with care." Fowler nodded, his fingers trembling slightly as he examined the pages. "This is no simple cipher," he murmured after a moment. "It's layered, parts shorthand, part substitution, and part something else entirely. Here," he pointed to a recurring symbol, a small spiral that appeared at the end of each coded line. "This isn't standard. It's almost as if she's pointing to something specific, a motif." Poirot's eyes narrowed. A motif in her stories. "Perhaps. Exactly," Fowler said. Christie was known for embedding clues in her work. "This spiralet reminds me of the rose emblem in her Poirot stories. Have you read The Hollow?" Poirot shook his head. The novel was published years after his own creation, a detail that always amused him. "Not yet, but I am familiar with her earlier works." "You believe the cipher is tied to her fiction?" Fowler nodded. "The spiral could be a rose, and roses appear frequently in her stories, symbolizing betrayal or hidden truth. I'd wager she's directing you to a specific book or passage." "Okay." The suggestion sparked a new line of inquiry. Poirot excused himself and sent for his friend, Captain Arthur Hastings, who arrived within the hour. His cheerful demeanor, a stark contrast to Fowler's intensity. Hastings, ever loyal, but not always astute, listened as Poirot explained the journal and the cipher. "Sounds like a lark, old boy," Hastings said, peering at the cryptic text. "But why go to all this trouble? If Agatha wanted to hide something, why not just burn the dashed thing?" "Because, mon ami," Poirot replied, "Madame Christie is a storyteller. She does not destroy, she conceals. This journal is her story, and we are meant to read it correctly." The trio worked late into the night, the room growing stuffy with cigarette smoke and the scent of cooling tea. Poirot directed Hastings to fetch copies of Agatha's novels from a nearby bookshop, while Fowler constructed a decryption grid based on the spiral motif. By midnight, they had a breakthrough. The cipher's key was indeed tied to the mysterious affair at Styles, Poirot's first fictional case. The novel's opening chapter contained a sequence of words key mirror rows that matched the journal's symbols when mapped to a numbered grid. Using this discovery, Poirot decoded the first full entry. "Torquay, my beginning, holds the first." Step. Seek the rose where my stories were born. Beware the shadows who guard their own secrets. The message was clear. Agatha was pointing to her birthplace, Torquay, and specifically to a rose, perhaps a literal emblem or a metaphorical clue. But the warning about shadows unsettled Poirot. Who were these guardians, and why would they care about a writer's personal journal? Fowler, exhausted but triumphant, leaned back in his chair. "She's brilliant," he said. "This isn't just a cipher, it's a narrative. She's telling you where to go next." Hastings, less impressed, yawned. "All this cloak and dagger for a trip to Devon. Kaise, Poirot, are you sure this isn't just a wild goose chase?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Nan, Hastings, no chase. It is a quest, and Madame Christie is our guide. We must go to Torquay." The next morning, Poirot and Hastings boarded a train at Paddington Station, the journal safely tucked in Poirot's valise. Fowler declined to join them, citing a prior engagement, but promised to continue analyzing the journal's later entries. As the train rattled through the countryside, Poirot pored over the mysterious affair at Styles, searching for further clues. The novel's references to keys and mirrors seemed deliberate, almost as if Agatha had written them with her future disappearance in mind. A passage about a locked drawer caught his attention. The key was in plain sight, yet no one saw it, for it was not a key at all, but a reflection of intent. The words echoed the journal's tone, and Poirot wondered if Agatha had planted similar clues across her oeuvre. He made a mental note to visit the British Library upon his return to cross-reference her novels for patterns. For now, Torquay beckoned. The seaside town was a study in contrast, charming, yet melancholic, its cliffs battered by the relentless sea. Poirot and Hastings checked into a small hotel near the harbor, where the air smelled of salt and seaweed. Their first stop was Greenway House, Agatha's childhood home, now a private residence, but open to visitors by appointment. Poirot had secured permission through a contact at Scotland Yard, claiming an interest in literary history. The house was a sprawling Georgian affair, its walls lined with portraits and its gardens bursting with roses. The caretaker, a wiry man named Mr. Trelawney, greeted them with suspicion. "Not many come poking around here," he said, eyeing Poirot's immaculate suit. "What's your business with Mrs. Christie's old place?" Poirot smiled disarmingly. "Merely a scholar's curiosity, monsieur. I wish to understand the mind that created such stories." Trelawney grunted, but led them inside. The house was a time capsule, its rooms filled with relics of Agatha's youth books, photographs, and a writing desk that caught Poirot's eye. Carved into its surface was a faint rose emblem, barely visible under layers of polish. Poirot's pulse quickened. This was no coincidence. "May I examine the desk?" he asked. Trelawney hesitated, then shrugged. "Suit yourself. It's locked, though, and the keys long gone." Poirot knelt, his fingers tracing the rose. Wood was worn but sturdy, and a faint click suggested a hidden mechanism. Using a hairpin from his paqueta, trick learned from a Parisian thief, he probed the lock. After a moment, the drawer sprang open, revealing a single sheet of paper. It was a letter, written in Agatha's hand, addressed to "My dear detective. You have found the first step, as I knew you would. My stories are my map, and you are its reader. Seek me where I was found, in Harrogate, at the Hydro. The rose will guide you, but beware those who hide in plain sight." Poirot folded the letter carefully, his mind racing. Harrogate was where Agatha had reappeared after her disappearance, staying under the alias Mrs. Neal. The letter confirmed her intent. This was a puzzle, a game, a challenge designed for him. But the warning about those who hide in plain sight echoed the journal's mention of shadows. Someone or something did not want this mystery solved. As they left Greenway House, Hastings noticed a figure lingering across the street, a man in a gray coat, his face obscured by a hat. "Odd chap," Hastings muttered. "Keeps staring." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps not so odd, mon ami. We are followed." They quickened their pace, weaving through Torquay's narrow lanes. The man in gray kept his distance, but never vanished, a persistent shadow in the gathering dusk. Half the hotel. Poirot booked a room at the Harrogate Hydro, determined to follow Agatha's trail. As he packed, he reread the letter, its words burning in his mind. "The rose will guide you." That night, he dreamed of roses red, blooming and dripping with dew that turned to blood. He awoke with a start, the journal still open on his bedside table. The cipher's next entry awaited, but for now, Harrogate called. Poirot knew the path ahead would be fraught with danger, but he was Hercule Poirot, and no puzzle, no matter how personal, would elude him. Chapter 3. The Torquay Trail. The train to Torquay rattled through the English countryside, its rhythm a steady counterpoint to Hercule Poirot's racing thoughts. The Belgian detective sat in a first-class carriage, his gloved hands folded neatly over the tattered journal Clara had entrusted to him. Its pages, filled with Agatha Christie's cryptic musings, lay like a puzzle in his lap, each word a breadcrumb leading him deeper into a mystery that blurred the lines between fiction and reality. Outside, the rolling hills of Devon blurred into a patchwork of green, kissed by the golden hues of an autumn afternoon. Yet Poirot's mind was far from the pastoral serenity. It was fixed on the symbol skis, mirrors, roses that Agatha had woven into her stories, pointing, he was certain, to this very destination, her birthplace. Torquay. He adjusted his perfectly knotted tie and glanced at the empty seat opposite him. The carriage was quiet, save for the soft clinking of teacups from a nearby passenger and the occasional whistle of the engine. Poirot's gray eyes, sharp as ever, darted to the journal once more. The word betrayal on its first page lingered in his mind, a stark warning that this was no ordinary case. Agatha's disappearance in 1926, though resolved with her reappearance in Harrogate, had left unanswered questions. And Poirot sensed that her journal was not merely a memoir, but a challenger gauntlet thrown down by a mind as meticulous as his own. The train slowed as it approached Torquay station. Poirot gathered his belongings, a small leather satchel containing his notebook, a fountain pen, and the journal, which he tucked carefully inside his overcoat. Stepping onto the platform, he inhaled the salty temps of sea air, a reminder of Torquay's coastal charm. The station bustled with travelers' families returning from holidays, businessmen in stiff collars, and locals carting baskets of fish from the nearby harbor. Poirot, with his impeccable suit and waxed mustache, stood out like a polished gem among rough stones. He tipped his hat to a passing porter and made his way toward the town center, where Agatha's childhood home, now a museum, awaited. The walk to Greenway House, as the museum was known, took him through Torquay's winding streets, lined with Georgian terraces and quaint shops selling cream teas and postcards. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of blooming roses from nearby gardens, a detail that did not escape Poirot's notice. Roses, he thought, recalling the symbol from Agatha's journal. Or were they a literal clue or a metaphor for something deeper? He paused at a corner, consulting a small map he'd acquired from Clara, which marked the museum's location on a bluff overlooking the River Dart. The path wound upward, past ivy-clad walls and a small church where seagulls wheeled. Overhead, their cries echoing like distant warnings as he approached Greenway House. Poirot's first impression was one of understated elegance. The white Georgian mansion stood surrounded by lush gardens, its windows glinting in the late afternoon sun. A sign at the gate read, "Greenway, home of Agatha Christie, open to the public." Poirot paid the modest entry fee to a cheerful docent named Miss Evelyn, A woman in her 50s with a penchant for floral scarves and an encyclopedic knowledge of Agatha's life. "Oh, you're here for the mystery, aren't you?" she said, her eyes twinkling as she handed him a pamphlet. Everyone comes hoping to find a secret in Agatha's walls. She was a clever one, our Dame Agatha. Poirot smiled politely, his mustache twitching. "Mademoiselle, I am not here for secrets, but for truths, okay? And truths, they have a way of revealing themselves to Hercule Poirot." Miss Evelyn chuckled, mistaking his earnestness for charm. "Well, you'll find plenty to ponder inside. The house is just as she left it, well, mostly. Mind the floors, they creak something awful." Inside, the house was a time capsule of Agatha's early years. Polished wood paneling lined the halls, and the air carried the faint scent of old books and lavender. Poirot wandered through the drawing room, where a grand piano stood beneath a portrait of a young Agatha, her eyes bright with mischief. He studied the room's details, the embroidered cushions, the mahogany bookshelves, the silver candelabra. Every object seemed to whisper of its former owner, yet none bore the symbols he saw until he reached the study. The study was a small, sunlit room at the back of the house, its walls lined with books and a single oak desk positioned beneath a window overlooking the river. Poirot's heart quickened as he approached the desk, its surface cluttered with quills, an inkwell, and a framed photograph of Agatha with her daughter, Rosalind. But it was the drawer on the right side that caught his eye. Carved into its wood was a delicate rose, its petals curling around a brass lock. He ran his fingers over the carving, feeling the faint grooves of craftsmanship. This was no coincidence. "Pardon, mademoiselle," Poirot called to Miss Evelyn, who was dusting a nearby shelf. "This drawer is locked." "Yes," she nodded, wiping her hands on her scarf. "Oh, that old thing? Been locked since Agatha's day. No one's ever found the key, and the curator says it's best left alone. Probably just old papers inside, if anything." But Poirot's eyes gleamed. Old papers, perhaps, but to Hercule Poirot, even the smallest scrap may hold the key to a great mystery. He reached into his satchel, producing a small leather pouch containing his lock-picking tools, a skill he had honed during his days with the Belgian police. With Miss Evelyn hovering curiously, he selected a slender pick and, with the precision of a surgeon, worked the lock. The mechanism clicked softly, and the drawer slid open, revealing a single envelope, yellowed with age, dressed in elegant script. "To my dear detective." Poirot's pulse quickened as he opened the envelope, careful not to tear its brittle edges. Inside was a letter, written in Agatha's unmistakable hand. "My dear detective, if you have found this, you are as clever as I imagined you to be. My disappearance was no mere whim, but a puzzle crafted to test the keenest of minds. You, Hercule Poirot, are my creation, yet I feel you are real, a mind to match my own. Follow the trail to Harrogate, where I was found, and seek the hydro. There, you will find the next piece of my story, okay? But beware, there are those who guard their secrets as fiercely as I guard mine. Trust in the symbols. The key unlocks, the mirror reflects, the rose conceals. Yours in mystery." Acpoioit folded the letter, his mind racing. Harrogate, the hydro, the secret society Clara had warned him about. He glanced at the rose carving again, noting its petals seemed to point downward, as if directing him to something beneath the desk. Kneeling, he examined the floorboards and found a faint seam, barely visible to the untrained eye. With a gentle press, a small panel popped open, revealing a velvet pouch containing a single brass key, etched with a tiny rose. He pocketed it, certain it would prove vital. Miss Evelyn, who had watched his efforts with growing astonishment, gasped. "Good heavens, Mr. Poirot, you found something, haven't you? Is it one of Agatha's secrets?" Poirot rose, dusting his knees. "Mademoiselle, It is but a piece of the puzzle. The truth, it lies in Harrogate, and thither I must go. That evening, Poirot checked into a modest inn near Torquay's Harbor. The seaside rose, its name another nod to Agatha's symbol. The innkeeper, a stout man named Mr. Hargreaves, welcomed him with a hearty handshake and a glass of port. "Not often we get a detective in these parts," he said, eyeing Poirot's impeccable attire. "You hear about that Christie business? Folks still talk about her vanishing, you know?" Poirot sipped a port, its warmth pleasant against the evening chill. "Monsieur, I am here to understand the story, not to add to gossip. Tell me, do you know of any unusual visitors to Greenway House in recent years? Perhaps those interested in more than mere tourism." Hargreaves scratched his chin, his brow furrowing. "Well, now you mention it, there was a fellow last summer, tall, gray-haired, wore a fine suit, but kept to himself. Asked a lot of questions about Agatha's study, wanted to know about that locked drawer, too. Didn't give his name, but he had a way about him like he was used to getting answers." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Okay. And did he leave anything behind, this man?" "Not that I know of," Hargreaves replied. "Tara and Harrogate after leaving here. Instead, he had business up north." The mention of the hydro sent a shiver down Poirot's spine. He thanked Hargreaves and retired to his room, where he spread out his notes on a small table. The journal, the letter, the key, they formed a constellation of clues, each pointing to Harrogate. But the gray-haired man troubled him. Was he member of the secret society Clara had mentioned? And why the interest in the locked drawer? Sleep eluded Poirot that night. He sat by the window, watching the moon cast silver ripples on the harbor. The journal lay open before him, its coded entries, a labyrinth of Agatha's mind. He traced a finger over a passage describing a mirror that hides the truth, wondering if it referred to a literal object or a metaphor for deception. His thoughts drifted to Agatha's novels, particularly The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, which he had begun rereading on the train. Its narrator, Dr. Shepherd, had concealed his guilt behind a facade of reliability, a mirror of sorts. Is Agatha suggesting that someone in her life played a similar role? The next morning, Poirot visited Torquay's local library, quaint building with stained glass windows depicting scenes from Devon's history. He requested access to Agatha's early manuscripts, hoping to find more instances of her symbols. The librarian, a young woman named Miss Beatrice, was eager to assist. "You're not the first to come looking for Agatha's secrets," she said, leading him to a glass case containing handwritten drafts. "But you're the first to look so determined." Poirot smiled. "Determination, mademoiselle, is the companion of logic. May I examine these closely?" With Beatrice's permission, he spent hours poring over the manuscripts, his magnifying glass in hand. In the mysterious affair at Styles, he found a reference to a rose-covered key hidden in a character's bureau. In Murder on the Links, a mirror reflected a crucial clue. The pattern was undeniable, a Caton had embedded. A real-life mystery in her fiction, a breadcrumb trail for a detective like Poirot to follow. He jotted down every instance, creating a map of symbols that converged on Harrogate as he left the library. A sudden gust of wind tore the notebook from his hands, sending pages fluttering across the street. A young boy, no more than 10, darted from an alley to help gather them. "Careful, mister," the boy said, handing back the pages. "Wind's fierce today." Poirot thanked him, noting the boy's sharp eyes and tattered coat. "You are quick, mon ami. Tell me, do you know Greenway House?" The boy nodded. "I used to play near there. Saw a man once, sneaking around the gardens at night. Had a flashlight, like he was looking for something." Poirot's interest piqued. "In this man, did he wear gray, perhaps?" The boy shrugged. "Couldn't see much, but he was tall. Dropped something shiny, though. Looked like a key." Poirot's heart skipped a beat. He pressed a shilling into the boy's hand. You have the makings of a fine detective. Keep your eyes open, yes." Returning to the inn, Poirot packed his belongings, his mind alight with possibilities. The gray-haired man, the key, the secret society, all were threads in Agatha's tapestry. I booked a ticket for the evening train to Harrogate, determined to reach the Hydro before his unseen pursuer could interfere. As he boarded the train, he glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see a figure in gray lurking in the shadows. The platform was empty, but the weight of unseen eyes pressed against him. The journey to Harrogate was long, the train weaving through darkened fields and sleeping villages. Poirot sat alone in his compartment, the journal open before him. Reread Agatha's letter, her words a haunting echo. Trust in the symbols. The key in his pocket felt heavier now, its rose etching a tactile reminder of the mystery's depth. He closed his eyes, letting his little gray cells work, piecing together the clues. Agatha had vanished to reclaim her agency, to outwit those who sought to control her. But who were they? Why guard a manuscript with such zeal? As the train neared Harrogate, Poirot's thoughts turned to the Hydro, a grand hotel where Agatha had been found, living under the alias Mrs. Neal. The name, he knew, was a jab at her husband's mistress, Nancy Neal. Was the alias part of her puzzle, or a personal defiance? He resolved to interview the hotel staff, to seek out the silver key the manager had mentioned in Clara's tales. But above all, he would follow Agatha's trail, trusting that her mind, his creator's mind, would guide him to the truth. The train pulled into Harrogate station just as dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Poirot stepped onto the platform, his breath visible in the chilly air. The Hydro loomed in the distance, its Victorian facade a beacon of answers and dangers. He adjusted his hat, gripped his satchel, and set off, the rose-checked key a silent promise in his pocket. The Torquay trail had led him here, but the mystery, he knew, was only beginning to unfold. Chapter 4. Shadows at the Hydra. The Harrogate Hydro loomed before Hercule Poirot, like a grand dowager, draped in Edwardian elegance, its stone facade softened by the late autumn mist that clung to the Yorkshire hills. Totil's tall windows glowed faintly, their light spilling onto the gravel drive where Poirot's hired car had deposited him. He adjusted his overcoat, its tailored lines impeccable despite the damp chill, gripped his cane, the silver head cool against his gloved hand. The letter from Agatha Christie, found in her childhood home, weighed heavily in his pocket, its cryptic directive, seek the Hydro, where truth hides in plain sight, urging him forward. As he stepped into the lobby, the air warmed with the scent of polished wood and faint traces of lavender from vases perched on marble tables. The grandeur was understated, a quiet opulence that whispered of bygone eras. A porter, young and eager, took his hat and coat while Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the room. A chandelier glittered above, casting prisms across the faces of guests, retired colonels, wealthy widows, and a smattering of younger couples, their laughter subdued by the weight of the hotel's history. Somewhere in this place, 11 days of Agatha Christie's life had vanished into mystery, and Poirot felt the familiar thrill of a puzzle unfolding. He approached the reception desk, where a clerk with a pinched face and wire-rimmed glasses greeted him. "Monsieur Hercule Poirot, I presume," the clerk said, his voice clipped but polite. "Your room is ready, suite 12, 3rd floor. Shall I have your bags sent up?" "I see, but I shall carry my own valise," Poirot replied, his accent precise, his smile disarming. "I wish also to speak with the manager, if you please. It is a matter of some historical interest." The clerk hesitated, then nodded. "Mr. Harrowby is in his office. I'll inform him you're here." As Poirot waited, he studied the lobby's details, the intricate molding along the ceiling, the faded grandeur of a tapestry depicting a hunt, and a grandfather clock ticking solemnly in the corner. His mind churned, piecing together the fragments of Agatha's letter. She had stayed here under the alias Mrs. Neal, a name that struck Poirot as deliberate, perhaps a nod to her husband's mistress, Nancy Neal. The choice was bold, almost defiant. And Poirot admired the audacity of a woman who could turn personal betrayal into a game of wits. The manager, Mr. Harrowby, emerged a stout man in his 60s, with a bald head gleaming under the chandelier and a mustache that rivaled Poirot's own in ambition, if not in precision. "Mr. Poirot," he said, extending a hand. "A pleasure. We don't often get detectives of your caliber here. How may I assist you?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Monsieur Harrowby, I am here to explore a curiosity from 1926, the stay of a certain Mrs. Neal. I believe she was a guest of yours during that December. Perhaps you recall her." Harrowby's smile faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "That was nearly a decade ago, sir. I was assistant manager then, but yes, I remember the affair. Quite the stir it caused. Mrs. Neal, or rather, Mrs. Christie, as the papers later revealed, remarkable woman." "Remarkable, indeed," Poirot said, leaning slightly on his cane. "I would be most grateful if you could share any memories of her time here. Perhaps there were unusual occurrences." Harrowby gestured toward a small parlor off the lobby, its velvet curtains drawn against the evening fog. "Let's speak privately," he said, his voice lowering. Poirot followed, noting the manager's quick glance over his shoulder, as if ensuring they were not overheard. The parlor was cozy, its walls lined with bookshelves and a fire crackling in the hearth. Harrowby poured 2 glasses of sherry from a decanter, offering one to Poirot, who accepted it with a nod. Mrs. Neal kept to herself, mostly. Harrowby began, settling into a leather armchair. She arrived without fanfare, booked a room under that name, and spent her days reading or walking the grounds. But there were oddities. Poirot sipped the sherry, its warmth spreading through him. "Oddities, monsieur." "Okay." Harrowby leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "She had visitors late at night. I'd see them from my office window, slipping in through the side entrance. One man, in particular, came several times, tall, cloaked, always wearing a hat pulled low. I never saw his face, but he left something behind once." Harrowby reached into his pocket and produced a small object, placing it on the table between them. It was a silver key, no larger than a matchstick, its bow intricately carved with a rose. Poirot's heart quickened. The rose, again Agatha's symbol, woven through her journal and novels. He picked up the key, turning it in the firelight. "This was left by her visitor." Harrowby nodded. "Found it in the corridor outside her room after one of his visits. Kept it, thinking it might be important. When the papers broke the story of her disappearance, well, I didn't know what to make of it. Seemed best to hold on to it." Poirot's mind raced. A key, a rose, a secret visitor. The pieces were tantalizing, but incomplete. "Did you ever learn the man's identity?" he asked. "No," Harrowby admitted, "but there were rumors. Some said he was connected to Ashfield Hall, the old manor, a few miles from here. It's owned by a reclusive family crane, I believe. They're private folk, but there's talk of, strange gatherings. Writers, artists, that sort. A society of sorts." Poirot's mustache twitched. Secret society, just as Agatha's letter had hinted. "This Ashfield Hall," he said. "It is open to visitors, perhaps." Harrowby shook his head. "Not without an invitation. But you're a clever man, Mr. Poirot. If anyone could find a way in, it'd be you." Poirot rose, slipping the key into his pocket. "Mercy, Monsieur Harrowby. You have been most helpful. I shall trouble you no further tonight." As he left the parlor, the weight of the key and Agatha's letter pressed against him, twin anchors in a sea of questions. The hotel's corridors were quiet as he ascended to his suite. The carpet, muffling his steps. Yet he felt a prickle at the back of his neck, the sense of being watched. He paused at a window, peering into the fog. A shadow moved across the lawn, brief and indistinct, then vanished. Poirot's grip tightened on his cane. The game, it seemed, was afoot. The next morning, Poirot hired a car and set out for Ashfield Hall. The silver key, a constant presence in his thoughts. The drive wound through rolling hills, the landscape muted by mist that clung to hedgerows and stone walls. His driver, a taciturn local named Thomas, offered little conversation, but Poirot's mind was too occupied to notice. The key, the rose, the secret society each was a thread in Agatha's tapestry, and he was determined to unravel it. Ashfield Hall appeared suddenly, its Gothic spires piercing the fog. The manor was imposing, its gray stone walls streaked with ivy, its windows dark and uninviting. Poirot instructed Thomas to wait and approach the iron gates, where a stern-faced groundskeeper eyed him suspiciously. "I am Monsieur Hercule Poirot," he announced, his tone polished but firm. "I am a historian researching the literary history of Yorkshire. I believe Ashfield Hall holds archives of interest. May I speak with the master of the house?" The groundskeeper, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, grunted. "Sir Edmund Crane don't take kindly to visitors. What's your business, exactly?" Poirot smiled, producing a forged letter of introduction from a fictitious Oxford professor. "Merely academic, my friend. I seek only to consult any manuscripts or correspondence that may shed light on the region's literary past." The groundskeeper studied the letter, then shrugged. "Wait here." He disappeared into a gatehouse, returning minutes later with a reluctant nod. "Sir Edmundale, see you, but don't expect a warm welcome." Poirot was led through a courtyard where statues of mythical beasts stood sentinel, their stone eyes seeming to follow him. The manor's interior was a labyrinth of dark wood and heavy drapes, the air thick with the scent of old books and wax. Sir Edmund Crane awaited him in a study lined with shelves, his lean frame silhouetted against a stained-glass window. He was in his 50s, with sharp features and eyes that gleamed with guarded intelligence. "Mr. Poirot," Crane said, his voice smooth but laced with suspicion. "Your letter claims an interest in Yorkshire's literary history. Yet I suspect you are not what you seem." Poirot bowed slightly. "You are perceptive, Sir Edmund. I am indeed a historian of sorts, but my interest lies in a specific author, Mrs. Agatha Christie. I believe she had connections to this house during her stay at the Hydro in 1926. Crane's expression tightened, a flicker of unease betraying his composure. "Mrs. Christie, a passing acquaintance, nothing more. Many writers visited Ashfield Hall in those days. We hosted salons, discussions. Nothing out of the ordinary." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, I have reason to believe a particular manuscript, lost work of hers may be connected to this place. A manuscript that could, perhaps, unsettle certain reputations." Crane's fingers twitched, betraying his top. "You tread dangerous ground, Mr. Poirot. Some secrets are best left buried." Before Poirot could press further, a commotion erupted in the hall. Raised voices echoed, sharp and urgent. Poirot excused himself and slipped into the corridor, where two men both in dark suits, their faces obscured by hats, argued heatedly. "The manuscript must be found," one hissed. "Its surfaces were all exposed." Poirot pressed himself against the wall, his heart pounding. The men's voices faded as they moved deeper into the manor, and he seized the opportunity to explore. Guided by instinct, he found the library, a cavernous room filled with leather-bound tomes and a massive oak table. A painting of a rose hung above the fireplace, its petals eerily lifelike. Poirot's gaze fell on a nearby bookshelf, where a faint seam suggested a hidden compartment. With deft fingers, he pressed the seam, and a panel clicked open, revealing a small recess. Inside was a photograph, yellowed with age. It showed Agatha Christie, her expression somber, standing beside a man in a tweed suit, his face partially obscured by shadow. On the back, in Agatha's handwriting, were the words, "The key unlocks the truth." Poirot pocketed the photograph, his pulse quickening. The silver key, the rose, the manuscript tit, was all connected. But before he could search further, footsteps echoed behind him. He slipped behind a curtain just as one of the suited men entered, his eyes scanning the room. "He's here, somewhere," the man muttered. "Find him." Poirot held his breath, the photograph and key burning in his pocket. When the man left, he crept toward a side door, emerging into the foggy night. The manor's grounds were a maze of hedges and statues, and as he navigated them, a figure loomed ahead, a tall man, cloaked, his hat pulled low. Poirot ducked behind a stone lion, but the man's footsteps grew closer, deliberate, predatory, clutching. The photograph. Poirot sprinted toward the gates, the fog swallowing his pursuer's form. He reached the car, where Thomas waited, and barked, "Drive, quickly." As the car sped away, Poirot glanced back, seeing only mist and shadow, but the photograph in his hand held a face, a clue, a piece of Agatha's puzzle. The game was far from over, and Poirot knew the next move would take him deeper into her world, a world where truth and fiction danced in dangerous harmony. The drive back to the hydro was silent, save for the hum of the engine and the patter of rain against the windows. Poirot's mind churned, the photograph and key anchoring his thoughts. Who was the man in the image? Why had Agatha left such a trail of clues? And what was the secret society guarding that made them so desperate to silence her? Back in his suite, Poirot locked the door and drew the curtains. He spread the photograph, the key, and Agatha's letter on the desk, their edges illuminated by a single lamp. The letters, words, echoed, "Seek the hydro, where truth hides in plain sight." He studied the photograph again, noting the man's posture, the way Agatha's hand rested lightly on his arm. There was familiarity there, trust, perhaps even affection. But the shadow across his face obscured his identity. A deliberate mystery. Poirot turned to the key, its rose engraving glinting. It was too small for a door, too ornate for a simple lock. A jewelry box, perhaps, or something more symbolic. He recalled Harrowby's mention of Ashfield Hall and the rumors of a society. Writers, artists, guarding their secrets. Journal had hinted at a group that shaped literary circles, wielding influence in ways the public never saw. Was this man one of them? And why had he visited her at the hydro? A knock at the door startled him. He slipped the photograph and key into his pocket and opened the door to find a maid, her apron pristine, her eyes wide with nervousness. "Mr. Poirot, sir," she said, her voice trembling. "There's a gentleman downstairs asking for you. He wouldn't give his name, but he's insistent." Poirot's instincts flared. "Describe this gentleman, if you please." "Tall, sir, dark coat, hat low over his eyes. He's waiting in the lounge, but he looks, well, not the sort you'd want to cross. Mercy, mademoiselle, tell him I shall be down presently." As the maid hurried away, Poirot checked his appearance in the mirror, smoothing his mustache. He slipped a small dagger into his sleeve of precaution. Not a habitant descended to the lounge. The room was dimly lit, its armchairs occupied by a few late-night guests nursing drinks. At a corner table sat the man, his back to the wall, his face half hidden by the brim of his hat. Poirot approached, his demeanor calm but alert. "Monsieur," he said, bowing slightly. "You wish to see Hercule Poirot." The man's eyes flicked up, sharp and assessing. "You're meddling in things that don't concern you," he said, his voice low, with a trace of a London accent. Leave Harrogate, forget the key, the photograph, all of it. Poirot's smile was icy. And if I do not? The man leaned forward, his gloved hand resting on the table. You're not the only one who can solve puzzles, detective. But some puzzles are dangerous. Walk away, or you'll regret it. Poirot's mind catalogued every detail of the man's gloves, the faint scent of tobacco, the slight tremor in his voice. I am not so easily deterred, monsieur. But I thank you for the warning. It confirms that I am on the right path. The man stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You've been warned, he said, and strode out into the night, leaving Poirot alone with the weight of his words. The next day, Poirot returned to Ashfield Hall, determined to uncover more about the secret society. This time, he posed as a literary critic, claiming an interest in rare manuscripts. The groundskeeper, less suspicious now, let him in, and Poirot was directed to the library once more. The rose painting caught his eye again, its petals seeming to pulse in the morning light. He searched the shelves, his fingers tracing spines, until he found a book, out of place, slim volume, titled The Rose and the Key. Opening it, he discovered it was hollow, containing a single sheet of paper. It was a list of names, some familiar writers, publishers, critics all, linked to the society. At the bottom was a note in Agatha's handwriting. They guard the truth, but the truth will out. Poirot's pulse quickened. This was no mere literary club. It was a network with power, and Agatha had threatened to expose it. As he pocketed the list, a shadow fell across the room. The same cloaked man from the previous night stood in the doorway, his eyes glinting with menace. You don't listen, do you? He said, stepping forward. Poirot's hand slipped to the dagger in his sleeve. I listen, monsieur, but I do not obey. Step aside, and we shall have no trouble. The man lunged, but Poirot was quicker, sidestepping and tripping him with his cane. The man crashed into a shelf, books tumbling around him. Poirot darted for the door, the list and photograph secure in his pocket. He reached the car and urged Thomas to drive. The manor fading into the fog behind them. Back at the hydro, Poirot locked himself in his suite and examined the list. One name stood out, Victor Langston, a playwright whose work had once rivaled Agatha's in popularity. The photograph's man could be him, tall, tweed-clad, with a presence that matched Agatha's description in her journal. Poirot resolved to find Langston, certain he held the key to the next clue. As night fell, Poirot sat by the window, the fog pressing against the glass. The photograph, the key, the list, they were pieces of a puzzle Agatha had crafted with exquisite care. But the danger was real, the shadows closing in. He clutched the silver key, its rose engraving a reminder of Agatha's challenge to solve her greatest mystery. Not as a detective, but as her creation, bound to her by the threads of her genius. Chapter 5. The man in the photograph, the train to London, rattled through the dusk, its rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to the storm brewing in Hercule Poirot's mind. The photograph, tucked securely in his breast pocket, pressed against his chest, like a silent accusation. The image of Agatha Christie, young and resolute, standing beside a man whose face was both unfamiliar and unsettlingly intense, haunted him. Victor Langston, the reclusive playwright, was the key to unraveling the next thread of Agatha's meticulously woven mystery. Poirot's fingers traced the edge of his mustache, a habitual gesture that steadied his thoughts. The stakes were rising. The shadows that had followed him from Harrogate were not mere figments of his imagination. The carriage was sparsely populated, save for a deer-faced businessman engrossed in his newspaper and a young woman knitting furiously, her needles clicking like a metronome. Poirot's eyes darted to the window, where the fading light painted the countryside in hues of amber and gray. He had left Torquay with more questions than answers, the letter from Agatha's childhood desk burning in his memory. My dear detective, you are closer than you know. Follow the trail to Harrogate, where I became another. But beware there. Society guards its secrets fiercely. The words were a challenge, a gauntlet, thrown by a woman whose genius lay not only in crafting mysteries, but in living them. As the train pulled into King's Cross Station, Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat and stepped onto the platform, the photograph a talisman guiding his next move. London was a city of secrets, its fog-laden streets a labyrinth where truth and deception danced a delicate waltz. His destination was the Gaiety Theatre, where Victor Langston was staging a play rumored to mirror Agatha's disappearance. Coincidence was too stark to ignore, and Poirot's instincts told him Langston held a piece of the puzzle. The theater district was alive with a buzz of evening crowds, lights casting a warm glow on cobblestones, slick with recent rain. The Gaiety's marquee glowed with the title, The Vanished Muse, a name that sent a shiver down Poirot's spine. He purchased a ticket from a harried box office clerk, noting the playbill's cryptic tagline, "What is lost in the fog may never be found." Slipping into the darkened auditorium, he chose a seat in the back, his sharp eyes scanning the audience for anything or anyone out of place. The curtain rose, revealing a stage set with an eerie facsimile of a foggy English countryside. The play's protagonist, a writer named Evelyn Gray, vanished from her home after a betrayal by her husband. The parallels to Agatha's life were unmistakable, and Poirot's mind raced as he noted every detail, the dialogue laced with references. 2 keys, mirrors, and roses, the same symbols he had uncovered in Agatha's journal. The actress playing Evelyn delivered a monologue that chilled him. "I vanished, not to escape, but to become, to write my truth in shadows where none could follow." As the first act ended, Poirot slipped backstage, his polished shoes silent on the worn wooden floor. The dressing rooms were a maze of costumes and props, the air thick with the scent of grease paint and dust. He knocked on the door marked V. Langston, Director, and a gruff voice bid him enter. Victor Langston was a tall, gaunt man with piercing gray eyes and a shock of silver hair that belied his 50 years. He sat at a cluttered desk, scribbling notes on a script, his face etched with the weariness of a man who carried secrets. Poirot introduced himself with his usual flourish, bowing slightly. "Monsieur Langston, I am Hercule Poirot, a detective of some repute. I come regarding a matter most delicate, tied to a woman whose shadow looms large over your play." Langston's pen froze mid-stroke, his eyes narrowing. "Poirot, the detective from Christie's novels. This is unexpected." His voice was smooth, but there was a tremor beneath it, a crack in the facade. "Unexpected, perhaps, but not without purpose," Poirot replied, producing the photograph and placing it on the desk. "This image, found in Ashfield Hall, suggests you knew Madame Christie intimately. Your play, The Vanished Muse, is no mere fiction, is it? It is a mirror to her life, her disappearance." Langston leaned back, his fingers steepled, studying Poirot with the intensity of a chess master facing a formidable opponent. "You're a clever one, aren't you? Yes, I knew Agatha. She was a singular woman, brilliant but wounded. She came to me in the summer of 1926, before she vanished. She spoke of a plan, a way to reclaim her life from the chaos of her husband's betrayal." Poirot's eyes gleamed. And this planet was to disappear. To stage a mystery that would outshine even her own stories. Langston nodded slowly, as if weighing each word. She called it her greatest performance, not just an escape, but a challenge. She wanted to see if the world door someone like you could unravel it. She entrusted me with a piece of her story, a coded map hidden in the script of a play I was writing. I wove it into the vanished muse, thinking no one would notice. Then you underestimate the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot, he said, his tone light but his gaze piercing. This map, where does it lead? Langston hesitated, glancing at the door as if expecting an interruption. It's not that simple. The map points to a cottage in Surrey, a place Agatha used as a retreat. But there are others who don't want her secrets aired. It's a society she mentioned in her letter there, real, and they're powerful. Writers, publishers, men of influence who guard their own mysteries. They've been watching you, Poirot. The detective's mustache twitched. Watching me, you say? Then they underestimate me as well. Tell me of this cottage, and do not play games with Hercule Poirot. Langston sighed, pulling a tattered script from a drawer. He flipped to a page marked with cryptic annotation lines of dialogue interspersed with numbers and symbols. The map is here, in the stage directions. It's a code, but you'll need the key to decipher it. Agatha gave me this. He slid a small brass key across the desk, engraved with a rose. It opens a box at the cottage. What's inside? I don't know. She never told me. Poirot pocketed the key, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. And why, monsieur? Langston, do you help me now? What is your stake in this game? Langston's eyes softened, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. Because Agatha deserved better than the world gave her. I failed her once, keeping her secret when I should have spoken out. This is my amends. The conversation was cut short by a sharp knock at the door. A stagehand's voice called, "Mr. Langston, 5 minutes to curtain." Poirot rose, tucking the script under his arm. I thank you, monsieur, but know this. If you withhold anything, I will find it, and I will not be kind. As he left the theater, the fog had thickened, wrapping London in a shroud. Poirot hailed a cab, directing the driver to Waterloo Station. The journey to Surrey was a calculated risk, but Agatha's trail was clear, and he would not falter. The train to Guildford was mercifully quiet, allowing him to study the script. The stage directions were a labyrinth of numbers and phrases, but Poirot's methodical mind began to unravel them. The numbers corresponded to map coordinates, and the phrases hinted at a rural path near Shear, a village in Surrey. The rose-engraved key weighed heavily in his pocket, a promise of answers. Arriving in Shear under a moonless sky, Poirot hired a local driver to take him to the Coordinates, secluded lane lined with ancient oaks. The cottage emerged from the darkness, its thatched roof sagging under the weight of years. The windows were dark, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. Poirot approached the door, his senses heightened. The lock yielded to the rose key, but as he stepped inside, his heart sank. The cottage was a scene of chaos. Furniture was overturned, books strewn across the floor, their pages torn and scattered. A writing desk in the corner had been pried open, its contents spilled like the entrails of a gutted beast. And there, in the center of the room, lay a shattered mirror, its fragments glinting in the faint light of Poirot's pocket torch. He knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the edges of the broken glass. Each piece was etched with a single word, faint but deliberate, as if carved by a trembling hand. He gathered the fragments, arranging them on the floor like a jigsaw puzzle. The words formed a message. Truth lies in her stories. Poirot's breath caught. Agatha had anticipated this violation, had left a clue even in destruction. The mirror was not just a symbol, it was a map to her mind, a directive to look deeper into her work. He recalled the symbols from her journal keys, mirrors. Roseanne realized they were not merely motifs, but markers pointing to her novels as the true repository of her secrets. Searching the cottage further, Poirot found a hidden compartment beneath a loose floorboard. Inside was a single page, torn from a notebook, with a handwritten note. Seek the bookshop on Charing Cross Road. The hollowed Ackroyd holds the rest. The reference to the murder of Roger Ackroyd, one of Agatha's most ingenious novels, was unmistakable. Poirot's pulse quickened. The bookshop was his next destination. But the ransacked cottage suggested he was not alone in his pursuit. As he stepped outside, a rustle in the bushes froze him. His torch swept the darkness, catching the glint of eyes before they vanished. Someone had been watching, waiting. Poirot's hand closed around the photograph, the script, and the key, his resolve hardening. The society Langston spoke of was closing in. But Hercule Poirot was not a man to be outwitted. The journey back to London was tense, the night pressing against the train windows like a living thing. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the fragments of Agatha's puzzle. The photograph of her with Langston, the coded script, scripted, the shattered mirror were threads in a tapestry she had woven with deliberate care. But who was the enemy? The secret society, with its shadowy influence, or someone closer, someone within Agatha's own circle? At Charing Cross Road, the bookshop was a narrow, cluttered haven, its shelves groaning under the weight of countless volumes. The owner, a bespectacled woman with a sharp gaze, eyed Poirot curiously as he inquired about rare editions of Agatha Christie's works. "Ackroyd, you say?" she mused, leading him to a dusty corner. "We've got a first edition, but it's not for sale. A private collector left it here, said it was special." Poirot's charm worked its magic, and soon he held the book in his hands. Its weight felt wrong, too heavy for its size. With the shopkeeper's reluctant permission, he pried open the cover, revealing a hollowed-out compartment. Inside was a second journal, its pages filled with Agatha's elegant script. The first entry read, "I am watched, always watched. The man in gray follows my every step, but I will not be cowed. My stories are my shield, my truth hidden in plain sight." As Poirot slipped the journal into his coat, a shadow moved outside the shop window. He turned, but it was gone. The street was empty, yet the air felt charged, as if the city itself were holding its breath. Clutching the journal, he stepped into the fog, unaware of the car that idled at the corner, its driver watching with cold intent. The chase was far from over, and Poirot knew the next move would test the limits of his cunning. Chapter 6. The shattered mirror of the cottage in Surrey stood like a forgotten relic, its ivy-clad walls sagging under the weight of time. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and a faint mist curled around the gnarled trees that guarded the property. Hercule Poirot, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the muddy path, adjusted his Homburg hat and surveyed the scene with his characteristic precision. The cottage, though small, exuded an air of secrecy, as if it held its breath, waiting for someone to pry open its truths. The shattered mirror he had found inside's jagged pieces scattered across the floor like a broken promise had already begun to speak to him, whispering clues in a language only his little gray cells could decipher. The journey to the cottage had been arduous, not in distance, but in the weight of expectation. Poirot had followed the coded map hidden in Victor Langston's play, a map that had led him here to this unassuming hideaway in the Surrey countryside. The playwright's confession in London had been a revelation. Agatha Christie, the woman who had breathed life into Poirot's very existence, had orchestrated her 1926 disappearance, not just as an escape from her husband's betrayal, but as a grand experimental puzzle designed to test whether a real detective could unravel her mind. The cottage, Langston had hinted, was a pivotal piece in that puzzle, a place where Agatha had retreated to weave her intricate web of clues. Poirot stepped over the threshold, his cane tapping lightly against a warped wooden floor. The interior was dim, the only light filtering through grimy windows, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The furniture was sparse: a rickety table, a sagging armchair, and a fireplace choked with ash. But it was the mirror, or what remained, of it that commanded his attention. The frame, once ornate, was now splintered, and the glass lay in fragments, each piece catching the faint light in a way that seemed almost deliberate. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over the shards, careful not to disturb their arrangement. His sharp eyes caught something unusual, faint etchings on the glass, barely visible in the dimness. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his mustache twitching as he leaned closer. "This is no accident. The mirror, it has been shattered with purpose." He retrieved a small magnifying glass from his coat pocket and examined the fragments. Each piece bore a single word, etched with precision, as if by a steady hand wielding a diamond-tipped tool. He collected the shards, placing them on the table like a jigsaw puzzle. The words were disjointed, seemingly random. Truth, lies, her, stories. Poirot's mind raced, arranging and rearranging the words until they formed a coherent message. Truth lies in her stories. He sat back, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Agatha, ma chère, you have left me a riddle within a riddle," he said aloud, his voice echoing in the empty room. But what stories? And where? The answer, he suspected, lay in Agatha's own works, particularly her Poirot novels. Recurring simple skis, mirrors. Rosa's had already pointed him to this cottage. But the message in the mirror suggested a deeper connection to her fiction. He recalled the pattern he had uncovered in the British Library, where her novels seemed to hide clues in plain sight. One book, in particular, stood out: The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, a masterpiece of misdirection that had stunned readers with its audacious twist. Could Agatha have embedded a clue in that very story, a novel that showcased her genius for deception? Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, and began to search the cottage for further evidence. The ransacked state of the room suggested someone had been here before him, someone desperate to find or destroy whatever Agatha had hidden. Drawers were overturned, cushions slashed, and books scattered across the floor. He picked up a tattered copy of The Mysterious Affair at Styles, its pages yellowed and dog-eared. Flipping through it, he found no annotations, no obvious clues. But as he set it down, a faint creak came from the floorboard beneath his foot. He paused, pressing down again. The creak repeated, louder this time. With a small smile, Poirot knelt and pried at the board with his cane. It lifted easily, revealing a small compartment beneath. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, its cover embossed with a rose. His heart quickened as he opened it, recognizing Agatha's elegant handwriting. The pages were filled with cryptic notes, fragments of thoughts, and sketches of mirrors and keys. One entry caught his eye: the bookshop on Charing Cross, where stories live and breathe. Seek the hollowed heart of Ackroyd. The truth waits there, but beware the shadow that follows. Poirot closed the notebook, his mind alight with possibilities. The bookshop on Charing Cross Road was a place he knew well, a haven for bibliophiles, where rare editions and forgotten tomes gathered dust. If Agatha had hidden a second journal there, concealed within a copy of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, it could hold a key to her entire plan. But the warning about a shadow troubled him. Someone was watching, someone who knew the value of Agatha's secrets. He slipped the notebook into his satchel and turned to leave. At a faint noise stopped him, a rustle from the back of the cottage, like the brush of fabric against wood. His hand tightened on his cane. "Who is there?" he called, his voice sharp but calm. "Show yourself, s'il vous plaît." Silence answered, but the air grew heavy with tension. Poirot moved cautiously toward the sound, his senses alert. The back door was ajar, swaying slightly in the breeze. Beyond it, a narrow path led into a thicket of trees. He stepped outside, scanning the shadows. A figure darted between the trees, too quick to identify, but the glint of metal in their hand sent a chill through him. Arates, Tears, Poirot shouted, but the figure vanished into the mist. He considered pursuit, but thought better of it. The cottage held no more secrets for now, and the bookshop was his next destination. He returned to the village, hiring a car to take him back to London. As the countryside blurred past, he opened the notebook again, rereading Agatha's words. The mention of a shadow gnawed at him. Was it the same pursuer who had chased him from Ashfield Hall? Or was it someone closer, someone within Agatha's circle? In London, the bookshop on Charing Cross Road was a labyrinth of shelves, its air thick with the musty scent of old paper. Poirot entered, his polished demeanor at odds with the cluttered chaos of the shop. The owner, a wiry man with spectacles perched on his nose, greeted him with a nod. "Looking for something specific, sir?" "Oui, monsieur," Poirot replied, his accent deliberate and charming. "I seek a particular edition of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Madame Christie. Perhaps one with unique qualities." The owner's eyes narrowed, but he gestured toward a corner of the shop. "Christie's popular, but Ackroyd's a classic. Got a few copies over there. Anything special you're after?" Poirot smiled enigmatically. "Let us say I am a collector of the extraordinary." He made his way to the indicated section, his fingers trailing along the spines of books. The shop was quiet, save for the occasional creak of floorboards and the murmur of other patrons. He found several copies of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, but none seemed out of the ordinary. Then, tucked behind a stack of unrelated novels, he spotted a copy with a worn dust jacket, its spine embossed with a faint rose. His pulse quickened as he pulled it from the shelf. The book felt heavier than it should. He opened it, and the pages parted to reveal a hollowed-out compartment, just as Agatha's note had suggested. Inside was another journal, its cover identical to the one from the cottage. He glanced around, ensuring no one was watching, and slipped the journal into his coat. As he turned to leave, a shadow moved at the edge of his vizuna tall figure, in a gray overcoat, lingering near the shop's entrance. Poirot's heart raced, but he maintained his composure. He approached the counter, purchasing a random book to avoid suspicion, then stepped into the bustling street. The gray-coated figure followed at a distance, their face obscured by a scarf. Poirot quickened his pace, weaving through the crowd, but the shadow kept pace, their steps deliberate. He ducked into an alley, his cane tapping a steady rhythm as he formulated a plan. The alley opened into a small courtyard, where a tea shop offered a temporary refuge. He entered, choosing a table near the window, and ordered a pot of Earl Grey. From his vantage point, he watched the alley, but the gray figure did not appear. Had he lost them, or were they merely biding their time? Opening the journal, Poirot found it filled with Agatha's reflections on her disappearance. The entries were raw, emotional, detailing her pain over Archie's affair and her fear of losing her identity as a writer. One passage stood out. "The man in gray haunts my steps, a shadow hired to watch me. I cannot trust those closest to me, not even my own heart, but my stories, they are my sanctuary. In them, I hide my truth, and only one with a mind like mine can find it." Poirot closed the journal, his mind racing. The man in gray confirmed his suspicions of a stalker, someone hired to monitor Agatha during her disappearance. But who and why were they still pursuing her secrets years after the event? The mention of her stories reinforced his belief that the murder of Roger Ackroyd held the key. He recalled a specific passage in the novel where a character's confession was hidden in plain sight, much like Agatha's own clues. As he sipped his tea, a sudden commotion outside drew his attention. A car roared down the street, its tires screeching as it swerved toward the pavement. Poirot leaped to his feet, instincts honed by years of danger. The car missed him by inches, crashing into a lamppost. Passers-by screamed, but Poirot's eyes were fixed on the driver, a figure in a gray coat, their face hidden by a hat. Before he could pursue, the driver stumbled from the wreckage and fled into the crowd. Poirot steadied himself, his heart pounding. "This is no coincidence," he muttered. "The shadow grows bold." He left the tea shop, clutching the journal tightly. The incident confirmed that someone was desperate to stop him, but it only strengthened his resolve. He hailed a cab, directing it to a quiet hotel where he could study the journal in safety. As the cab pulled away, he glanced back, half expecting to see the gray figure. The street was empty, but the weight of unseen eyes lingered at the hotel. Poirot locked the door and drew the curtains before opening the journal. The entries grew more fragmented, Agatha's handwriting unsteady, as if written under duress. She described a sense of betrayal, not just from Archie, but from others in her literary circle. One name appeared repeatedly: Sir Edmund Crane, a powerful publisher with whom Agatha had clashed over her manuscripts. Could Crane be the mastermind behind the shadow, the one orchestrating efforts to suppress her secrets? Poirot turned to the murder of Roger Ackroyd, rereading key passages. The novel's narrator, Dr. Shepherd, had hidden his guilt in plain sight, much like Agatha seemed to be doing with her journals. This particular line caught his eye. "The truth, however ugly in itself, is always curious and beautiful to the seeker." After it was a clue, he was certain, pointing to a specific location or object tied to Agatha's disappearance. He cross-referenced the journal, finding a sketch of a key with a note: "The key to my truth lies where stories are sold." The bookshop had been one such place, but there was another possibility: larger, more prominent bookstore, Foyle's, also on Charing Cross Road. If Agatha had hidden another clue there, it could be the final piece of the puzzle. But the shadow loomed large. Poirot knew he could not return to Charing Cross Road without a plan. He contacted Clara, the retired journalist, arranging to meet her at a discreet cafe. Clara arrived, her face pale with worry. "You're getting too close," she warned, her voice low. "I've heard whispers of a group, a society of writers and publishers who will do anything to keep Agatha's manuscript buried." Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "This society, they fear her truth. But why? What is in this manuscript that threatens them so?" Clara hesitated, then leaned closer. Agatha knew secrets about influential people, their affairs, their manipulations. She wove them into her stories, disguised as fiction. Her manuscript reveals those truths. It could ruin reputations, even now. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then we must protect it, and we must find the final clue." "Tell me, Clara, do you know of a key, perhaps one tied to a bookstore?" Clara's eyes widened. "There's a story or rumor that Agatha left a key at Foyle's, hidden in a book. But it's dangerous, Hercule." "Quoi? They're watching you." He smiled faintly. "Let them watch." Poirot does not falter. The next morning, Poirot arrived at Foyle's, his appearance altered with a scarf and a less conspicuous coat. The bookstore was a cathedral of knowledge, its shelves towering like the walls of a labyrinth. He navigated to the mystery section, searching for another copy of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. This time, he found a first edition, its pages crisp despite its age. Inside, taped to the end paper, was a small silver key, its handle shaped like a rose. He pocketed the key, his heart racing. As he turned to leave, a hand grabbed his arm. He spun, expecting the gray figure, but it was a young woman, her eyes wide with fear. "You're Poirot, aren't you?" she whispered. "I'm Emily, Agatha's niece. She told me you'd come one day." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Mademoiselle, you have information for me." Emily glanced around, then pulled him into a secluded corner. "Aunt Agatha left me a letter years ago. She said if a detective ever came looking, I should give him this." She handed him a sealed envelope, its edges yellowed with age. Inside was a single sheet written in Agatha's hand. The key unlocks the heart of my sanctuary, a place where stories are born. Find it, and you find me. Poirot's mind raced. The sanctuary could only be one place: Agatha's writing room, perhaps at her home in Devon or another secret location. The key in his hand felt heavy with promise. When, as he thanked Emily and stepped into the street, a familiar gray figure emerged from the crowd. Their eyes locked on him. This time, Poirot was ready. He darted into a side street, leading the figure on a chase through London's maze of alleys. He ducked into a doorway, watching as the gray figure passed, their steps faltering. When they were out of sight, he slipped away, the key and envelope secure. Back at his hotel, Poirot examined the key, its rose-shaped handle gleaming in the lamplight. The sanctuary, he deduced, was likely Ashfield, Agatha's childhood home, in Torquay, where he had already found clues. The key might unlock a hidden compartment, perhaps in her writing desk, that he had overlooked. But the shadow's persistence suggested time was running out. He booked a train to Torquay, his mind buzzing with the puzzle's complexity. Agatha's disappearance was not just a personal act, but a literary masterpiece, a challenge to her own creation. As the train pulled away from London, Poirot gazed out the window, the journal open in his lap. The words, "Truth lies in her stories," echoed in his mind. A reminder that Agatha's genius lay not just in her novels, but in her ability to make life itself a mystery. Chapter 7. The Stalker's Shadow. The rain fell in a relentless curtain over London, cloaking the city in a shimmering veil of mist. Hercule Poirot stood beneath the awning of a small, dimly lit cafe on Chancery Lane, his gloved fingers clutching the second journal he had retrieved from the bookshop. Its leather cover was worn, its pages heavy with secrets penned in Agatha Christie's precise hand. The words within hinted at a figure who had haunted her steps before her disappearance, man in gray, whose presence cast a long, chilling shadow over her life. Poirot's mind, sharp as ever, churned with questions. Who was this man? Why had he followed her? And what connection did he have to the secret society of writers hinted at in her letters? The cafe's warmth beckoned, but Poirot resisted the urge to linger. The near miss with the car outside the bookshop had left him wary. Someone was watching, someone who knew he was closing in on the truth. His mustache twitched as he adjusted his hat, pulling it low over his piercing gray eyes. The journal's latest revelation, a mention of a private investigator hired by Agatha's husband, Archie, had set him on a new trail. If this man in gray was indeed the investigator, Poirot needed to find him. And if the man still lived, he might hold the key to unraveling the deeper mystery of Agatha's 11 lost days. Poirot hailed a cab, its tires hissing against the wet cobblestones. To St. Pancras, he instructed the driver, his voice clipped but polite. The nursing home where the investigator now resided was on the outskirts of London, a place called Willow Grange, tucked among the grey-green hills of Kent. The journal had provided a name: Harold Grayson, a man whose profession had once been to shadow others, but who now, according to Clara's discreet inquiries, lived out his days in obscurity. His memory fading as fast as his health, the cab ride was long, the city giving way to sodden fields and skeletal trees. Poirot's thoughts drifted to Agatha's words in the journal. The man in gray is always there, at the edge of my vision, like a ghost I cannot shake. I wonder if he knows my heart better than I do. The words were poetic, almost mournful, but Poirot sensed a hidden strength in them. Agatha had not been a victim. She had been a strategist, weaving her own disappearance into a puzzle that even he, Hercule Poirot, found challenging to solve. At Willow Grange, the air smelled of damp wool and antiseptic. The nursing home was a sprawling Victorian manor, its once grand facade crumbling under the weight of neglect. Poirot stepped into the reception hall, his polished shoes clicking on the cracked marble floor. A nurse, her face pinched with fatigue, looked up from her desk. "Monsieur Poirot, to see Mr. Harold Grayson," he said, offering a small, courteous bow. "I am an old acquaintance, come to pay my respects." The nurse's eyes narrowed, but she nodded. "He's in the East Wing, room 14. He doesn't get many visitors. Mind, he's not always lucid." Poirot inclined his head. "Shall be gentle, mademoiselle." The corridor to Grayson's room was lined with faded photographs of the manor, in its heyday when it had been a retreat for the wealthy. Now it housed the forgotten, their lives reduced to whispers in the halls. Poirot knocked softly on the door to room 14, then entered without waiting for a response. Harold Grayson sat in a wheelchair by a rain-streaked window, his thin frame draped in a gray blanket that matched the pallor of his skin. His hair was white and sparse, eyes clouded but sharp when they met Poirot's. The room was sparse abed, a bedside table cluttered with pill bottles, and a single framed photograph of a young woman with a familiar smile. "Agatha, Monsieur Grayson," Poirot began, his voice soft but firm. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I have come to speak of a matter from long ago, a matter concerning Mrs. Agatha Christie." Grayson's hands trembled on the arms of his wheelchair, but his gaze held steady. "Poirot," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves. "I've read her books. You're the detective, aren't you? The one she made up." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "I am real enough for this moment, monsieur. And I believe you know something of a mystery that is very real indeed." Grayson's eyes darted to the photograph on the table, then back to Poirot. "What do you want with an old man like me? I'm nobody now." "You were once a private investigator," Poirot said, seating himself in a creaking wooden chair opposite Grayson. "Hired, perhaps, by Colonel Archie Christie to follow his wife, to watch her, to report her movements. Is this not so?" Grayson's breath hitched, and for a moment Poirot thought he might deny it. But the old man's shoulders sagged, and he nodded. "Aye, it's true. Archie paid me well to keep tabs on her. Said she was acting strange, that he was worried she'd do something foolish. Pia, but I knew better. He wasn't worried about her, he was worried about himself." Poirot leaned forward, his hands clasped over the silver head of his cane. "And what did you find, Monsieur Grayson? What did you see when you followed her?" Grayson's gaze drifted to the window, as if the rain could wash away the memories. "She was clever, that one. Knew I was tailing her, I reckon. She'd take odd routes, double back, slip into shops, and out the back door. But I was good at my job. I saw her crying once, in a park near their house. Not loud. Mind you, just sitting on a bench, staring at nothing. Tears rolling down her face. Broke my heart. It did." Poirot's expression softened, but his mind remained razor sharp. "And did you report this to Colonel Christie?" Grayson snorted, a sound halfway between a laugh and a cough. "I've reported what he paid me to report, where she went, who she spoke to, but I left out the tears. Didn't seem right to sell a woman's pain." Poirot nodded, his respect for the old man growing. "But there's more, is there not? You discovered something about her plans, her disappearance, perhaps?" Grayson's hands tightened on the blanket, his knuckles whitening. "You're a sharp one, just like she wrote you, eh? I figured out she was planning something. She to go to this little bookshop on Charing Cross, spend hours there, writing in a journal. I'd watch from across the street, see her scribbling away, like she was pouring her soul onto the page. One day, I got close enough to overhear her talking to the shopkeeper. She mentioned Harrogate, said she needed a place to disappear. For a while, I knew then she was up to something big." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And did you tell Colonel Christie of this?" Grayson shook his head. "Not right away. I followed her to Harrogate, saw her check into the hydro under a false name, Mrs. Neal, she called herself. I thought about telling Archie, but then trailed off, his voice cracking. Then Poirot prompted gently. Grayson's eyes met his, filled with a mix of guilt and defiance. Someone else got to me first. A man came to me, right there in Harrogate. Tall, posh, with a voice like velvet and eyes like a snake. Offered me more money than Archie ever could to keep my mouth shut. Said it was for her own good, that she needed to sort herself out without interference. I took the money. God help me, I took it. Poirot's mind raced. This man, this stranger, could be the key to the secret society Agatha had hinted at. This man, he said carefully. Did he give a name, a description, perhaps? Grace's lips twisted into a grimace. Called himself Crane, Sir Edmund Crane. Said he was a publisher, but he didn't act like any publisher I had ever met. Too slick, too dangerous. He knew things about me, things I'd done, cases I'd worked. Tate made it clear that if I talked, I'd regret it. Poirot's heart quickened. Sir Edmund Crane, the powerful publisher whose name had surfaced in Clara's research as a figure in literary circles. A man with the means and motive to protect a secret society's interests. And did you see Madame Christie again after this? Grayson nodded, his eyes distant. One last time. She came to me, found me in a pub in Harrogate, bold as brass. Gave me this. He gestured weakly toward the photograph on the table, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, tarnished locket. Kay handed it to Poirot with trembling fingers. Said to keep it safe, that it was a piece of her story. I never opened it. Didn't feel right. Poirot took the locket, its surface cool against his palm. It was silver, engraved with a delicate rose, and the date, December 14th, 1926. He flicked it open, revealing a tiny photograph of Agatha, her eyes bright with defiance. A slip of paper was tucked inside, folded so small it was nearly invisible. Poirot unfolded it with care, revealing a single line in Agatha's hand. The truth waits at the silent pool. He looked up at Grayson, who was watching him intently. You have kept her secret all these years, Poirot said softly. Why? Grayson's voice was barely a whisper. Because she trusted me, a nobody. She looked at me like I was more than a hired shadow. I couldn't betray that. Poirot closed the locket and slipped it into his pocket. You have done well, Monsieur Grayson. Your silence has protected her story until now. But I must ask one final question. Did Madame Christie ever speak of a manuscript, a hidden journal that others might wish to suppress? Grayson's eyes widened, and for a moment Poirot thought he saw fear. She mentioned it once, he said. Said it was her greatest work, but it wasn't for the world to see. Said it would shake the foundations of some powerful people. I didn't ask more. I didn't want to know. Poirot rose, his mind already piecing together the next steps. The silent pool, a place of myth and mystery in Surrey, was where Agatha's trail led next. But Crane's involvement complicated matters. He was the leader of this secret society. As Poirot suspected, then the danger was far from over. Thank you, Monsieur Grayson, Poirot said, placing a hand on the old man's shoulder. You have given me much to ponder. Rest now, and know that you have aided in a great cause. Grayson's eyes glistened. Find her truth, Poirot. She deserves that. As Poirot left the room, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, the sky a bruised gray. He stepped into the courtyard, his thoughts a whirlwind. The locket in his pocket felt heavy, not with weight, but with meaning. December 14th, 1926, the day after Agatha was found in Harrogate. Whatever she had hidden at the silent pool, it was the final piece of her puzzle, the culmination of her daring escape. But as he hailed another cab, a prickle of unease ran down his spine. A man stood across the street, half hidden by the shadow of a gnarled oak. His coat was gray, his face obscured by a low-brimmed hat. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane. Was this the same man in gray who had haunted Agatha's steps? Or was it another of Crane's agents, sent to ensure the manuscript never saw the light of day. The cab pulled up, and Poirot climbed inside, his eyes never leaving the figure. To Waterloo Station, he told the driver. He would take the train to Surrey, to the silent pool, and confront whatever waited there. But first, he needed to prepare. Crane was no ordinary adversary. Again, the society he protected would not yield their secrets easily. The cab wound through the rain-slicked streets. Again, Poirot opened the journal again, rereading Agatha's words. The man in gray is always there at the edge of my vision. He closed the book, his resolve hardening. Whoever this man was, whatever his purpose, Poirot would find him, and he would uncover the truth Agatha had hidden, no matter the cost. The train to Surrey was crowded, its compartments filled with the hum of conversation and the clatter of wheels. Poirot found a quiet corner, his mind racing as he considered his next move. The silent pool was a place steeped in legend, said to be haunted by the ghost of a drowned maiden. It was a fitting choice for Agatha, a woman who wove mystery into every facet of her life. But what had she hidden there? Another journal? A final letter? Or something more tangible? Something that could bring down a society of literary titans? The train sped through the countryside. Poirot's thoughts turned to Clara, the retired journalist who had set him on this path. She had warned him of shadowy figures, of a conspiracy that reached beyond Agatha's personal drama. He made mental note to contact her upon his return to ensure her safety. If Crane's men were watching him, they might turn their attention to her next. The station at Guildford was a bustle of activity. But Poirot moved with purpose, hiring a car to take him to the silent pool. The driver, a cheerful man with a thick Surrey accent, chatted amiably about the local legends. "They say the pool's cursed," he said, glancing at Poirot in the rearview mirror. "Folk drown there, and their ghosts linger. You sure you want to go poking around?" Poirot smiled faintly. "I am a detective, monsieur. Poking around is my profession." The driver chuckled, but his expression sobered as they approached the pool. The road narrowed, flanked by dense woods that seemed to swallow the light. The silent pool itself was a perfect oval, its surface mirror smooth despite the drizzle. Poirot stepped out of the car, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the muddy earth. He thanked the driver and sent him on his way, preferring to face the mystery alone. The air was heavy with the scent of damp moss and pine. Poirot circled the pool, his eyes scanning for any sign of a rose's symbol that had guided him thus far. The journal's clues had been deliberate, each one a breadcrumb leading him closer to Agatha's truth. He paused at a cluster of wild roses growing near the water's edge, their petals bruised by the rain. Kneeling, he examined the ground, his fingers brushing aside leaves and twigs. There, half buried in the mud, was a small, rusted box, its lid etched with a rose. Poirot's heart quickened as he pried it open, revealing a sealed envelope inside. The paper was brittle, yellowed with age, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Agatha's. He slipped the envelope into his coat, unwilling to open it until he was certain he was alone. But he was not alone. A rustle in the trees made him turn, his hand tightening on his cane. The figure in gray was there, closer now, his face still hidden. Poirot stood, his voice calm but commanding. "Show yourself, monsieur. I am Hercule Poirot, and I do not fear shadows." The figure hesitated, then stepped forward, revealing a man in his 40s, his face lined with weariness. "I'm not your enemy, Poirot," he said, his voice low. "I was her friend. She asked me to watch over this place, to make sure no one found it until the right person came along." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you believe I am that person?" The man nodded. "She said you'd come, said you'd understand her better than anyone." The words struck Poirot like a blow. Agatha had created him, shaped his mind, his methods, And now, it seemed, she had trusted him to finish her story. He held up the envelope. "This is hers, is it not?" The man's eyes softened. "It's the last piece. But be careful, Poirot. There are those who'd kill to keep it buried." Poirot nodded, his mind already turning to Sir Edmund Crane and the confrontation that awaited. "Thank you, monsieur. Your duty is done." The man in gray melted back into the trees, and Poirot stood alone by the silent pool, the envelope burning a hole in his pocket. The rain had stopped, and the first stars were piercing the dusk. Heat would return to London, confront Crane, and uncover the final truth of Agatha's disappearance. But for now, he allowed himself a moment to breathe, to feel the weight of her. Trust. The mystery was not yet solved, but Hercule Poirot was closer than ever. And he would not rest until every shadow was brought into the light. Chapter 8. The Silent Pool. The mist hung low over the silent pool. A glassy lake nestled in the Surrey hills, its surface so still it seemed to hold its breath. Hercule Poirot stood at the water's edge, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the damp earth. The air was heavy with the scent of wet moss and pine, and a faint chill crept through his overcoat. In his gloved hand, he held the locket from the private investigator, its rose engraving glinting faintly in the pale morning light. The date etched beside it, December 14th, 1926, had led him here, to this secluded spot where Agatha Christie's final clue awaited. Poirot's gray eyes scanned the lake, sharp and unyielding. The silent pool was no ordinary place. Local legend whispered of its depths, hiding secrets of spirits that lingered in its waters. He dismissed such tales as fanciful, yet the eerie calm of the scene stirred even his rational mind. The journal, the photograph, the shattered mirror, all had pointed to this moment. Somewhere in or around this lake lay a submerged box marked with a rose, the final piece of Agatha's puzzle. But Poirot knew the solution would not come easily. The secret society, with its veiled threats and shadowy influence, would not let their secret surface without a fight. He adjusted his hat, the brim casting a shadow over his face, and murmured to himself, "Mon Dieu, Madame Christie, you have woven a web most intricate." But Hercule Poirot does not falter before a challenge. His voice, soft yet resolute, carried a trace of admiration for the woman who had created him. Her mind as labyrinthian as the mysteries she penned. The trail to the silent pool had not been straightforward. After leaving the nursing home, Poirot had spent hours poring over maps and local records in a small Surrey library, his fingers tracing the contours of the region. The locket's date had sparked a memory of a newspaper clipping Clara had shown him, a brief mention of Agatha being sighted near the silent pool during her disappearance. The rose, a recurring motif in her clues, suggested a physical marker. A groundskeeper at a nearby estate had spoken of a rose stone near the lake, a weathered marker half buried in the undergrowth. It was there Poirot began his search. He circled the lake, his steps deliberate, eyes darting to every shadow and ripple. The rose stone was not hard to find. A slab of granite, its surface carved with a faint rose, barely visible beneath decades of moss. Kneeling, he brushed the stone clean, revealing an inscription, "Truth lies below." His heart quickened. Agatha's words, always layered, always precise. The box, he deduced, must be submerged, hidden in the lake's depths. But how to retrieve it? The water was dark, its depths obscured by algae and sediment. Poirot was no swimmer, and the idea of plunging into the cold, murky lake was as distasteful as an ill-prepared café au lait. He straightened, dusting his gloves, and considered his options. The groundskeeper had mentioned a local fisherman, a man named Thomas Wren, who knew the silent pool better than anyone. Poirot resolved to find him. The village of Sheer, a mile from the lake, was a cluster of timber-framed cottages in cobblestone lanes. Poirot found Wren in a cramped pub, the White Horse nursing a pint at a corner table. The man was weathered, his face etched with lines like the grain of old oak. His eyes wary as Poirot approached. "Monsieur Wren," Poirot began, bowing slightly. "I am Hercule Poirot, a detective of some repute. I seek your knowledge of the silent pool." Wren squinted, setting his pint down with a thud. "Ain't much to know. It's a lake. Deep, quiet. Folks say it's cursed, but I don't hold with that nonsense." Poirot smiled thinly. "I am not interested in curses, monsieur, but in objects that may lie beneath its surface. A box, perhaps, marked with a rose." Wren's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Poirot thought he saw a flicker of recognition. "A box, you say? Ain't nobody dives that lake. Too dangerous. Currents, they say, pull you down. Yet you have fished there, Nan. You know its secrets." Poirot leaned forward, his voice low, persuasive. "I require your assistance, and I am prepared to compensate you generously." Wren hesitated, then drained his pint. "All right, mister, but it'll cost you, and I ain't diving. I'll take you out in my boat, show you the deep spots. That's all." An hour later, Poirot sat in Wren's small rowboat, the oars creaking. As they glided across the silent pool, the mist had thickened, cloaking the shore in a ghostly veil. Wren pointed to a spot where the water darkened, a shadow beneath the surface. "There's a drop-off here," he said. "Deepest part of the lake. If your box is anywhere, it's there." Poirot peered over the edge, his stomach tightening at the thought of the inky depths. "Is there no way to retrieve it without diving?" he asked. Wren chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Not unless you've got a net long enough, or a miracle." Poirot's mind raced. A net might work, but it would require precision. We recalled a technique from a case in Antwerp where smugglers had used weighted nets to retrieve sunken contraband. "Monsieur Wren, do you have a net, strong and long, with weights to sink it?" Wren scratched his chin. "Got an old fishing net at home. Might do the trick, but it'll take time to fetch it." "Then fetch it, if you please," Poirot said, his tone firm. "Time is a luxury we may not have." As Wren rowed back to shore, Poirot's gaze lingered on the lake. He felt the weight of unseen eyes, a sensation that had dogged him since Harrogate. The secret society Crane's men, perhaps, would not let Agatha's final clue be unearthed without resistance. He slipped the locket into his pocket, its cold metal a reminder of the stakes. Wren returned with the net, a tangle of coarse rope and lead weights. Together, they maneuvered the boat back to the drop-off. Poirot, with uncharacteristic clumsiness, helped Wren cast the net, its weight pulling it deep into the water. They dragged it slowly, the boat rocking as the net scraped the lake bed. Minutes passed, each one stretching Poirot's patience. Then, a tug, something heavy, caught in the net. "Pull, monsieur," Poirot urged, gripping the rope. Wren grunted, his arms straining as they hauled the net upward. It broke the surface, dripping, and with it came a small metal box. Its surface pitted but unmistakable, a rose etched on its lid. Poirot's heart leaped. "Magnifique," he exclaimed, reaching for the box. It was locked, but the mechanism was simple, a pin tumbler he could pick with ease. He set to work with a hairpin from his pocket, his fingers steady despite the boat's sway. The lock clicked, and the lid sprang open. Inside lay a single letter, sealed with wax, the rose emblem pressed into it. Poirot broke the seal, unfolding the paper with care. Agatha's handwriting, elegant and precise, filled the page. "My dear detective, if you've read this, you have proven yourself the equal of my creation. My disappearance was no mere whim, but a necessity of flight from a life that sought to cage me, and a challenge to see if my greatest detective could unravel my truth. The secret society led by Sir Edmund Crane, sought to silence me, fearing my manuscript would expose the manipulation of literary minds. They underestimated me, as they will you. The manuscript lies with Crane in his London estate, locked in a safe only you can open. Trust your little gray cells, Poirot. You are my triumph. Yours, Agatha. Poirot's breath caught. Agatha had not only staged her disappearance, but had crafted it as a game, a test for him, a fictional detective brought to life by her will, yet the danger was real. Crane's influence stretched far, his society a web of power and secrecy. Poirot folded the letter, tucking it into his coat. Monsieur Wren, we return to shore. There is work yet to be done. Wren rowed in silence, but as they neared the bank, a rustle in the trees made Poirot stiffen. A figure moved in the mist, too fleeting to identify. Quickly, monsieur, he whispered, his hand on the locket. Wren grunted, pulling harder on the oars. They reached the shore, and Poirot leaped out, his eyes scanning the woods. The figure was gone, but the sense of being watched lingered. He turned to Wren. You have my thanks and my payment. He pressed a wad of notes into the fisherman's hand. Speak of this to no one. Wren nodded, pocketing the money. Ain't my business, mister. Good luck. Poirot made his way to the village, his mind already turning to London. Crane's estate would be no easy target. A publisher of his stature would have guards, locks, perhaps traps. But Poirot had Agatha's letter, her trust, and his own unyielding determination. He would face Crane, retrieve the manuscript, and protect her legacy. The train to London was crowded, the compartment filled with the chatter of travelers. Poirot sat by the window, the locket in his hand, his thoughts a whirlwind. Agatha's words echoed, "You are my triumph." He smiled faintly, a rare warmth softening his features. She had created him, but in this moment he felt he was more than her creation, a partner in her greatest mystery. As the train rattled on, a man in a gray coat boarded at the next station, his face half hidden by a scarf. Poirot's instincts flared. The man in Agatha, stalker from Agatha's journal. He watched the stranger from the corner of his eye, noting the way his hand lingered near his pocket, as if gripping something, a weapon. Perhaps Poirot's hand tightened on the locket. He would not be caught off guard. The journey to London passed in tense silence. Poirot disembarked at Victoria Station, the gray-coated man trailing at a distance. He wove through the crowd, his steps quick and purposeful, leading the man into a maze of side streets. In a narrow alley he turned, confronting his pursuer. "Monsieur," Poirot said, his voice sharp, "you follow Hercule Poirot at your peril. Reveal yourself, or I shall summon the authorities." The man froze, then raised his hands, the scarf slipping to reveal a young face, nervous but not malicious. "I'm not here to harm you," he stammered. "My name's Daniel. I work for Clara. She sent me to warn you. Crane knows you're coming. He's got men watching his estate." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And why should I trust you, Mr. Daniel?" Daniel fumbled in his pocket, producing a note in Clara's handwriting. "Trust Daniel. Crane's men are closing in." Poirot read it twice, then nodded. "Very well, you will accompany me. But know this, Hercule Poirot is not easily deceived." Daniel swallowed, nodding. Together they hailed a cab to Crane's estate, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of London. The plan was forming in Poirot's mind, a gambit to outwit Crane, to slip past his defenses and claim the manuscript. But as the cab rolled through the darkening streets, Poirot knew the silent pool had been only the beginning. The true test lay ahead, and he would need every ounce of his cunning to prevail. The estate loomed, its iron gates gleaming under the moonlight. As Poirot adjusted his hat, his resolve as unyielding as the steel before him. Agatha's legacy depended on him, and he would not fail her. Chapter 9. The publisher's gambit The late autumn air clung damply to Hercule Poirot as he stepped from the hansom cab onto the rain-slicked cobblestones of Mayfair. The grand estate of Sir Edmund Crane loomed before him, its Georgian facade illuminated by flickering gaslights that cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. Ivy crawled up the stone walls, curling like secrets around the tall windows, each one aglow with a promise of warmth and treachery within. Poirot adjusted his immaculate overcoat, his gloved fingers brushing the brim of his hat as he surveyed the scene. This was no ordinary visit. It was a calculated move in a game of chess where the stakes were Agatha Christie's legacy and the truth of her mysterious disappearance. The journey to this moment had been arduous. From the cryptic journal in Clara's attic to the submerged box at the silent pool, every clue had pointed to Crane, the enigmatic publisher whose influence stretched like a spider's web across London's literary world. Poirot's little gray cells hummed with anticipation. The manuscript, the key to Agatha's 11-day vanishing act in 1926, lay within Crane's reach, locked in a safe at the British Museum. But to retrieve it, Poirot would need to outwit a man who thrived on power and deception. He adopted the persona of Monsieur Henri Dubois, a French literary agent with a penchant for rare manuscripts and a fabricated connection to Parisian publishing houses. The disguise was meticulous: a slightly garish cravat, a faint trace of lavender cologne, and a leather portfolio stuffed with forged credentials. Poirot's mustache, always his pride, was subtly waxed to a less severe point, softening his appearance to suit the flamboyant Dubois. With a final glance at the estate's imposing oak doors, he rang the bell, its chime echoing like a summons to battle. A butler, stiff as a starched collar, greeted him. "Monsieur Dubois, I presume." His voice was clipped, his eyes assessing. "Oui, c'est moi," Poirot replied, his accent deliberately thickened, a touch of Parisian flair in his tone. "I am expected by Sir Edmund. It's a matter of literary importance. N'est-ce pas?" The butler led him through a marble-floored foyer adorned with portraits of stern-faced men, their eyes seeming to follow Poirot as he passed. The air smelled of polished wood and old money, tinged with the faint musk of cigar smoke. They ascended a grand staircase, its banister gleaming under crystal chandeliers, and entered a drawing-room where Sir Edmund Crane awaited. Crane was a man of imposing presence, though not in stature. He was slight, with sharp features and eyes like polished obsidian, glinting with a predatory intelligence. His tailored suit was impeccable, but the nervous tap of his fingers against a mahogany desk betrayed a restlessness. Behind him, a fireplace roared, casting a warm glow that did little to soften the room's chill. "Monsieur Dubois," Crane said, rising with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "A pleasure. I understand you've come about a rare manuscript." Poirot bowed slightly, his portfolio clutched like a shield. "Indeed, Sir Edmund. I have heard whispers of a work by the great Agatha Christie, a manuscript of unparalleled value. My clients in Paris are most eager to acquire it." Crane's smile tightened, a flicker of suspicion crossing his face. "Agatha Christie, you say? Her works are well known, but I'm unaware of any unpublished manuscript in my possession." "Oh, but the rumors, they persist," Poirot said, his voice light but his eyes locked on Crane's. "A journal, perhaps? One that tells a story not of fiction, but of truth. A story of a disappearance, a secret society, a betrayal." The room seemed to contract. The fires crackled the only sound. Crane's fingers stilled, and for a moment Poirot saw the mask slip a flash of alarm in those obsidian eyes. Then Crane laughed, a hollow sound. "You've been reading too many of her novels, Monsieur Dubois. Agatha was a storyteller, nothing more. Her disappearance was a stunt, a cry for attention. There's no grand conspiracy." Poirot tilted his head, feigning curiosity. "And yet, Sir Edmund. The literary world whispers of your society, the Order of the Quill, is it not? A group of writers and publishers who guard their secrets jealously. I wonder, did Agatha threaten to expose something you wished to keep hidden? Crane's face darkened, but he recovered quickly, gesturing to a decanter of brandy on a sideboard. A drink, monsieur. You seem parched from spinning tales. None, mercy, Poirot said, waving a hand. But I will take the truth, if you please. The manuscript, Sir Edmund. It is in the British Museum, locked in a safe under your name. I know this, and I know why you wish to keep it buried. Crane's composure wavered, his hand hovering near the decanter, as if reconsidering the drink for himself. You're remarkably well informed for a literary agent, he said, his voice low. Who are you, really? Poirot allowed a small smile, dropping the Dubois accent just enough to let his true voice, Hercule Poirot's, shine through. I am a man who seeks the truth, Sir Edmund, and I believe you have it. Agatha Christie entrusted me, in her way, to find it. The manuscript is her story, her triumph. You cannot silence her. Crane's eyes narrowed, and he leaned forward, his voice a hiss. You're no agent. You're that Detective Poirot, Agatha's little creation, come to life to haunt me. He straightened, regaining his poise. Very well, Poirot. Let's speak plainly. Agatha was a liability. Her manuscript, if it exists, would ruin reputations. My, Archie's, others. She played a dangerous game, vanishing like that, and she paid the price. Paid? Poirot's voice was sharp. She returned, did she not? She lived, she wrote, she triumphed. But you, Sir Edmund, you feared her words. You pressured her to abandon the manuscript, to bury her truth. Why? Crane paced to the fireplace, his silhouette stark against the flames. Agatha was brilliant, but naive. She thought she could toy with the order, expose our ... arrangements. We controlled the literary world, Poirot. Reviews, sales, reputations, they bend to our will. Her manuscript threatened to reveal that, to show how we shaped her career. Archie's infidelity, all of it. Kiro's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The Order of the Quill wasn't just a society, it was a cabal, manipulating the literary landscape for profit and power. Agatha's disappearance, her manuscript, had been a rebellion against their control, a way to reclaim her voice. And so you silenced her, Poirot said softly. Not with violence, perhaps, but with threats, with fear. I made her doubt her own strength. Crane turned, his face a mask of defiance. I did what was necessary. The manuscript is safe, locked away when no one will find it. And you, Poirot, will not leave this house with it. As if on cue, the drawing-room doors swung open, revealing two burly men in dark suits. Their faces were grim, their hands resting on concealed weapons. Poirot's heart quickened, but his expression remained serene. He had anticipated this. Sir Edmund, he said, rising, you underestimate Hercule Poirot. I am not so easily dispatched, but let us make a bargain. Tell me where the safe is, and I will ensure the manuscript is handled with discretion. Agatha's legacy will be protected, not exploited. Crane laughed, a bitter sound. You think you can bargain with me? The safe is in the British Museum, as you guessed, but is guarded by more than locks. You'll never reach it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. We shall see, Sir Edmund. We shall see. The men advanced, but Poirot was prepared. From his portfolio, he produced a small vial, uncorking it with a flourish. A pungent odor filled the room, chloroform, diluted just enough to disorient. The men hesitated, coughing, and Poirot seized the moment, darting past them toward a side door he'd noted earlier. It led to a narrow corridor, likely a servant's passage, and he slipped inside. The portfolio clutched tightly. The corridor was dim, its walls lined with faded wallpaper, and cobwebs. Poirot moved swiftly, his polished shoes silent on the worn runner. Behind him, he heard shouts. Crane's men were recovering, and the hunt was on. His mind churned, mapping the estate from the brief glimpse he'd had of its layout. The servants' passage would lead to the rear of the house, near the stables, where a cab might still wait. He emerged into a moonlit courtyard, the air sharp with the scent of wet grass and horses. The cab was gone, likely dismissed by Crane's orders. Poirot cursed softly in French, his eyes scanning for an escape. A low wall bordered the courtyard, beyond which lay a dense grove of elms. It was his only chance. He vaulted the wall with surprising agility for a man of his fastidious nature, landing in the soft earth of the grove. The shouts grew closer, lanterns bobbing in the distance. Poirot wove through the trees, his breath steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. He needed a plan, a way to reach the British Museum before Crane could move the manuscript. As he emerged onto a quiet street, a stroke of luck, a lone taxi idled at the corner, its driver smoking a cigarette under a gas lamp. Poirot approached, resuming his Du Bois persona with a disheveled charm. "Mon ami, to the British Museum, vite. A generous tip for your haste." The driver, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, grunted and flicked his cigarette away. "Get in, mate. Museum's closed this hour, but I'll get you there." The cab rattled through London's fog-choked streets, the city a blur of shadows and sodium light. Poirot's mind worked furiously. The British Museum was a fortress of knowledge, its reading room a sanctum for scholars. But Crane's safe would be in a restricted area, likely the basement archives, guarded by locks and perhaps men loyal to the order. He needed an ally, someone with access. His thoughts turned to Clara, the retired journalist who had set him on this path. She had contacts in literary circles, perhaps even at the museum. He scribbled a note on a scrap of paper from his portfolio. "Clara, urgent. Meet me at British Museum, North Entrance, midnight. Key you possess. HP." He handed it to the driver with a shilling. "Deliver this to Miss Clara Wentworth, Fleet Street. No delay." The driver nodded, pocketing the coin, and Poirot leaned back, his fingers drumming on the portfolio. The museum loomed ahead, its neoclassical facade a pale specter in the fog. He paid the driver and slipped into the shadows near the north entrance, where a retiring gate stood locked. The hour was late, the streets deserted, but Poirot's senses were alert. Crane's men could be anywhere. Minutes ticked by, each one a weight on his nerves. Then a figure emerged from the fog. Clara, her coat pulled tight against the chill, a small key glinting in her hand. "Poirot," she whispered, "this had better be worth it. I pulled every string to get this skeleton key for the staff entrance." "Magnifique, Mademoiselle Clara," Poirot said, his voice low. "You are a treasure. Now we must move swiftly." The key turned smoothly in the lock, and they slipped inside, the gate creaking softly behind them. The museum's interior was a labyrinth of marble and shadow, its galleries silent, save for the echo of their footsteps. Clara led the way, her knowledge of the museum's layout gleaned from years covering literary scandals. They descended a spiral staircase to the basement, where the air grew musty, thick with the scent of old paper and dust. The archives were a maze of shelves, each laden with crates and folios. Poirot's eyes scanned for a safe, his torch casting a narrow beam. The far end, behind a stack of manuscripts. He spotted it, a steel safe, its surface embossed with the emblem of a quill. Crane's mark. Clara produced a hairpin, but Poirot shook his head. "Nan, this requires finesse." "Ha!" He knelt, his ear pressed to the safe's door, his fingers turning the dial with the precision of a surgeon. The tumblers clicked, a symphony of mechanics yielding to his skill. The door swung open, revealing a single item, a leather-bound manuscript, its cover stamped with a rose. Poirot lifted it reverently, his gloved fingers tracing the title, The Silent Days. Agatha's words. Her truth lay within. He opened it, scanning the first page, and his breath caught. It was not just a recounting of her disappearance, but a confession of her heart, a woman betrayed, yet unbroken, who turned her pain into a puzzle for her greatest creation to solve. "We must go," Clara urged, her voice tight. "Huh." Footsteps echoed above, heavy and deliberate. Crane's men had found him. Poirot tucked the manuscript into his portfolio and led Clara through a side passage, one he'd memorized from a museum blueprint, studied days earlier. The passage wound beneath the reading room, emerging near a service exit. They burst into the night, the fog thicker now, a shroud against pursuit, but the pursuit was relentless. A black car roared from the shadows, its headlights slicing through the mist. Poirot grabbed Clara's arm, pulling her into an alley as the car screeched past. They ran, their breaths ragged, until they reached Bloomsbury Square, where a late-night cafe offered sanctuary. Inside, under the dim glow of a single bulb, Poirot opened the manuscript again, its pages a beacon of Agatha's resilience. Clara leaned over, her eyes wide. "What does it say, Poirot? Is it worth all this?" He read aloud, his voice steady despite the danger. "I vanished not to escape, but to become. In those 11 days, I wrote my truth, knowing it might never see light. But if you read this, my detective, you have proven me right that the mind can triumph over betrayal, that a story can outlive its teller." Clara's eyes glistened. "She wrote it for you." "For us," Poirot corrected. "For all who seek the truth." The cafe door rattled, and Poirot tensed, but it was only the wind. Still, he knew Crane's men were close. He closed the manuscript, his resolve hardened. "We must protect this, Clara. It is Agatha's legacy, her triumph over those who sought to silence her." They slipped out the back, disappearing into the fog, the manuscript a weight both heavy and sacred. Poirot knew the game was not over. Crane would not relent, but for now, he had won this round. Under a flickering street lamp, he read on. Agatha's words, a mirror to his own relentless pursuit of justice, her strength a fire that warmed his soul. Chapter 10. The final revelation. The dawn broke over London with a soft, golden haze, as if the city itself were exhaling a sigh of relief after the long, twisting mystery that had consumed Hercule Poirot. The Belgian detective stood at the window of his modest room at the Savoy Hotel, his silhouette framed against the pale light. His fingers traced the edges of the manuscript he had retrieved from Sir Edmund Crane's safe at the British Museum, a tattered, stained bundle of pages that held the heart of Agatha Christie's 11-day disappearance in 1926. It was more than a manuscript. It was a confession, a puzzle, and a testament to the woman who had breathed life into him. Poirot's gray eyes, sharp as ever, flickered with a rare softness as he gazed out at the Thames, its waters glinting like a mirror under the rising sun. The manuscript lay on the table behind him, its secrets now fully unraveled, but its weight lingered in his mind. He had solved the mystery, not merely as a detective, but as a man bound to his creator by an invisible thread of intellect and heart. Yet, the final act remained, to decide the manuscript's fate and to honor Agatha's legacy. He turned from the window, his polished shoes clicking softly on the hardwood floor, and sat at the table. The manuscript's final pages were spread before him, their words a delicate dance of truth and fiction. Agatha had written of her disappearance not as a victim, but as a storyteller, weaving her greatest tale of reclaiming her identity from the wreckage of betrayal. Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. "Mon ami," he murmured, "you were always one step ahead. N'est-ce pas?" A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. "Entrez," he called, adjusting his tie. With a practiced flick, the door opened to reveal Clara, the retired journalist who had first drawn him into this labyrinth. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, but her eyes betrayed a restless curiosity, as if she, too, felt the pull of Agatha's story. "Monsieur Poirot," Clara said, stepping inside with a cautious smile. "I couldn't sleep. Not after everything. Have you read it all?" "Ha!" Poirot gestured to the chair opposite him. "Oui, Madame Clara. Every word. It is, how you say, a masterpiece of the heart as much as the mind." Clara sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "And what does it say? What did she hide from the world?" Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled in thought. "Okay. It is not merely what she hid, but why. Okay. Madame Christie crafted her disappearance as a story, a challenge to herself, and, perhaps, to me. She wished to prove that she could outwit the world, even those who sought to silence her. The manuscript reveals her pain, her strength, and her genius. It also carries a wish that its truth remain private, a triumph known only to those who truly understand her." Clara's brow furrowed. "You mean she didn't want it published? After all we've been through to find it." Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet conviction. To publish it would be to betray her once more. She did not vanish to become a Bakine. Heart earring, Sydney, heart earring. Today, I just know it's gonna be. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. When it's hard. 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 Which it's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's it all. It's a ga. It's a ga. G-I. Spectacle, but to reclaim her soul. We must honor that. Clara leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But the secret society, Sir Edmund Crane and his ilk, they wanted it buried. If we don't publish it, aren't we letting them win?" Poirot shook his head, a spark of mischief in his expression. Non, ma cher. The society's power is broken. Their influence relied on secrecy, on fear. By uncovering the manuscript, we have stripped them bare. To publish it would only feed their legacy of control. No, we shall let Agatha's victory remain her own. Clara sat back, her eyes searching his face. "You're certain, then? You'll keep it hidden?" Poirot's gaze drifted to the manuscript, its pages worn but resolute, much like Agatha herself. "I am certain. First, I must return to you the manuscript, as you are the one to entrust me with this journey. And then, there is one final place I must visit to pay my respects to the woman who made me." Clara nodded slowly, her expression softening. "Where will you go?" "To her grave," Poirot said simply. "To lay a rose and to say, mercy." The train to Wallingford was a quiet one, its rhythmic clatter a soothing counterpoint to the storm of thoughts in Poirot's mind. He sat, alone in a first-class compartment, the manuscript secured in a leather satchel at his side. The countryside rolled past in a blur of green fields and stone walls, but Poirot's attention was fixed inward. He thought of Agatha's words in the manuscript, her confession of the pain caused by her husband Archie's affair, her fear of losing herself to the public's gaze, and her audacious decision to vanish not as an act of defeat, but as a declaration of independence. The manuscript had revealed more than her motives. It had painted a portrait of a woman who saw in Poirot not just a character, but a mirror of her own resilience. "You, my dear detective," she had written, are the part of me that refuses to bend, that sees through the chaos to the truth. Poirot felt a pang of pride, tempered by humility. He was, after all, her creation. Yet he had become her confidant in this real-life mystery. The train slowed as it approached Wallingford, and Poirot gathered his satchel, his cane, and his resolve. The small town was quaint, its streets lined with ivy-clad cottages and bustling with the gentle hum of daily life. He hired a car to take him to St. Mary's Church, where Agatha rested. The driver, a cheerful man with a thick Oxfordshire accent, chatted amiably about the town's history, unaware of the weight of Poirot's mission as they neared the church. Poirot's thoughts drifted to the secret society that had loomed over this case. Sir Edmund Crane, the publisher with his polished veneer and ruthless ambition, had been the linchpin. His attempts to suppress Agatha's manuscript had been driven by fear not of scandal, but of losing control over the literary world he dominated. The society, a shadowy cabal of writers and publishers, had guarded their influence with a zeal that bordered on fanaticism. Yet, Poirot's confrontation at Crane's estate had shattered their facade. Crane's admission, reluctant though it was, had confirmed Agatha's fears. They had watched her, manipulated her, and tried to silence her, but she had outwitted them, and Poirot had finished the task. The car stopped at the churchyard, and Poirot stepped out, the autumn air crisp against his face. "Wait here, s'il vous plaît," he told the driver, who nodded and lit a cigarette. Poirot walked through the iron gate, his steps measured, the satchel heavy in his hand. The churchyard was peaceful, its gravestones weathered but dignified, surrounded by yew trees that whispered in the breeze. He found her grave easily, guided by instinct as much as memory. The stone was simple, bearing her name and dates: Agatha Mary Clarissa Christie, Cis 1891,976. Below it, a line from her own words, and in the end, "Us. The love you take is equal to the love you make." Poirot knelt, his gloved hand brushing the grass. From his pocket, he drew a single red rose, its petals vibrant against a gray stone. He placed it gently on the grave, his fingers lingering for a moment. "Madame," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of their shared journey, "you have given me life, not merely in your pages, but in this world. Your courage, your wit, your heart, they are mine as well. I have solved your mystery, as you knew I would, and I will keep your secret, as you wished." He stood, his eyes tracing the inscription. The rose seemed to glow in the soft light, a symbol of the bond between creator and creation. For a moment, Poirot felt as if Agatha were there, her sharp eyes watching him with approval, a faint smile on her lips. He tipped his hat, a gesture of farewell and gratitude, and turned to leave. Back in London, Poirot arranged to meet Clara one final time at a small cafe near the British Library. The city was alive with the hum of progress, its streets crowded with motor cars and pedestrians, yet the cafe offered a quiet haven. Clara was already there, sipping tea, her eyes bright with anticipation. "Well, Monsieur Poirot," she said as he sat, "did you find what you were looking for at her grave?" Poirot smiled, setting the satchel on the table. "I found peace, Madame Clara, and now I return this to you." He slid the satchel toward her, the manuscripts safely inside. Clara's hands hesitated above it, as if afraid to touch it. Sure about this? Not publishing it? It's quite sure," Poirot said firmly. "Agatha's story is not for the world to dissect. It is for those who loved her, who understood her. You, Madame, are one such person. Keep it safe, but let it remain private." Clara nodded, her eyes misting. "I'll guard it with my life. But what about you? What's next for the great Hercule Poirot?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a hint of amusement. The world, it is full of mysteries, Nan. There's always another case, another puzzle, to unravel. But this was special. It was personal. They sat in companionable silence, the weight of their shared adventure settling between them. Clara reached into her bag and pulled out a small, leather-bound book, a first edition of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. "I found this in my attic, alongside the journal," she said. "I thought you might like it." Poirot took the book, his fingers tracing the embossed title. "A fitting gift," he said. "Merci beaucoup." As they parted ways, Poirot felt a lightness he hadn't known in weeks. The secret society was no more, its members scattered, their influence diminished. Agatha's manuscript was safe with Clara, its secrets preserved. And he, Hercule Poirot, was free to return to his life of solving crimes, his bond with his creator stronger than ever. That evening, Poirot boarded a train to Paris, his next case already whispering in the back of his mind. The compartment was warm, the seats plush, and as the train pulled away from Victoria Station, he opened The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. A slip of paper fell out, a note in Clara's neat handwriting. "To the detective who sees the truth. Thank you." Poirot smiled, tucking the note into his pocket. The train gathered speed, carrying him toward new horizons, but his heart lingered on the woman who had shaped him. Agatha Christie, the master of mystery, had given him more than a story. She had given him a purpose. And as the lights of London faded into the night, Poirot knew he would carry her legacy with him always.